G'day, hobbyists. Anthony from AOS Coach here, talking to you about the faction focus that is one of my favorite armies that I'm not collecting just yet, but I'm sure the people going to talk to us about it are going to inspire the heck out of me. We are talking about Sylvaneth. We're talking about the Tree People. We're talking about Alariel's Chosen. And with me, I have two very special guests from us in Sydney, in Australia, some of the best Sylvaneth players going around. We have Chris Welfare. Chris, how are you, legend?
Good, thanks, mate. Thanks for having me. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year indeed. And a bit of background, Chris, you've been playing Sylvaneth for a while?
Yeah, I've been playing them since I think the book first came out. It was the first battle tome that dropped that had kind of full spell or artifacts and everything, which really just drew me in, pulled me. For those who don't know me, I am the co-host of the Mortally Wounded podcast based here in Sydney, obviously originally from the UK, as you can probably tell. But I've been here for the last 4 years and kind of in and around one of the main faces of the AOS scene, I guess, around Sydney since the beginning of AOS, really, just kind of helping build it and getting around to tournaments interstate fairly regularly. So yeah, that's me.
Awesome. And if you're not familiar with the podcast, definitely check out Mortally Wounded. It is a great podcast. You can hear some real competitive but also narrative type gaming from two Aussie legends. Chris is one of them. James Mabry is another. My other guest I have is Liam the Villain. Liam.
What is up? Hey everyone. So I'm Liam from Shadowhammer podcast and aka the AOS villain. Me stirring up shit on the internet 24/7. So I've been collecting Sylvaneth since just off the General's Handbook and generally just got drew by it, by how awesome the army and the models look. Like Kurnoth Hunters and Durthu were definitely my huge favorite models, especially the Kurnoth Hunters. They're the most epic models to look at and still my favorite model to build and paint today. That's why I own 24 of them now. So so pretty much that's a quick little intro about me and Sylvaneth.
And you're also on a podcast if people aren't listening to the podcast.
Yeah, so Shadowhammer is the podcast. I generally have guests from the gaming group Clan Filth and a couple of other guests as well joining. And it's just mainly competitive AOS talk and chat, really. It's really good. I enjoy doing it, and most people enjoy listening to competitive talk and a bit of shit stirring. So yeah.
So if you want to have some good commentary and some discussion, Liam is the man that creates engagement across the country.
Yep.
So Sylvaneth is one of my favorite armies that I'm not collecting, and there's so much to like about Sylvaneth that I'm really fortunate to have you both on the line. And I guess, I want to start off at a very, very high level. I've never read any lore. Let's hypothetically imagine that. Who is the Sylvaneth?
So they are the children of Alariel, quite simply. But in terms of anyone that played from the old world, I guess it's kind of the Dryads, the Treekin, that sort of things, although the Treekin have sort of been compendiumed away. But it's kind of the forest spirits, the forest children, really. Not the wood elves. They became wanderers, so they're kind of separate. But it's the more tree creature type. And then along with Age of Sigmar, there's kind of newer creations that are sort of half elf, half trees in the Tree Revenants and Spite-Revenants. And then you've got the mid-range kind of Kurnoth Hunters, which are, I guess, the reimagining the Age of Sigmar-fying Treekin, and they're kind of smaller tree lords, really, that are armed with a variety of weapons, and they're kind of Alariel's main bodyguards.
Yeah. And they follow the god Kurnoth heaps as well in the lore, which is cool. And they're pretty much exactly what Chris said. They have civilizations. They're mainly based in Ghyran, but there's in the lore and stuff, you can slowly see that they like travel around to different parts of Ghyran and other realms as well, which is really cool. And then you also have Drycha. Drycha's also a named character in there who is I don't know much about her old world lore, but she's a huge character as well. And
she used to be a branch. She used to be a branch wraith equivalent, but yeah, since Age of Sigmar, she's kind of she reminds me of a branch wraith in kind of Ripley armor. If anyone knows Alien, that's essentially what's happened. But that Ripley armor is a tree lord, so she's kind of a branch wraith inside a big tree, living kind of suit of armor that's got colonies of bugs and flitter furies and things that she sends out to attack her enemies.
Yeah, and there's so much lore on Sylvaneth, I think, and it's one of those things that you can imagine that across all of the mortal realms there are trees, and so you can imagine that no matter where you are, there's going to be some form of Sylvaneth going around, which I think is super exciting from a conversion point of view.
Yeah.
Also,
Really
they
cool.
go through the seasons in terms of Alariel's rebirth, and what kind of season she's reborn into, and where that seed kind of pod is planted determines her aspect. So now she's emerged into the mortal realm. She's in her war aspect, so she's kind of going out and getting stuff done, and she's angry.
She's awesome.
Yeah, sorry, go on.
She's so pretty, the model. Just like, just can't stop staring at it. Such an awesome model. So keen to paint mine up. But that's pretty much what the Sylvaneth are, really.
So what attracted you? So Alariel has an amazing model, and anyone that looks at that Beetle and Alariel, that was definitely a model that kind of drew my interest. What else attracted you to the Sylvaneth?
Yeah, Alariel, she's one of my top 3 all-time favorite Age of Sigmar models. So that was a huge draw once I saw that. But as I mentioned before, I think the real thing that attracted me to them was at the time they came out, it was the first battle tome that had a full spell lore. It had artifacts, items, and the play style kind of with the woods being so important and teleportation around the board due to them, and they're quite magical by nature. So it just kind of really drew me. I'd always liked the wood elves, but it was never really an army that I'd had before, so that kind of foresty theme really kind of drew me, and that was what I wanted to get in and get on board with the Sylvaneth, really.
What drew me was how I think I was like playing 40k at the time, and I wanted to go to AOS, and seeing the Kurnoth Hunters and Durthu, that's what drew me. I was like, these are epic models, I would love to paint them and stuff. They seem epic, and most people were telling me that they were like amazing in game. And since my competitive self was like, yep, sounds good. And I really like collecting armies with a battle tome. So the fact that I had a battle tome all wrapped up with some cool like synergies and strategies in it and stuff, I was like, yeah, this seems like the army for me. Especially even though it was like probably one of the most finesse armies to start, it is still like an army where like every game I'm still learning something what to do and what not to do with my army. Even though like some people might think they've mastered Sylvaneth, but like you can't really master Sylvaneth. Like so many things could happen which you can't control. But we're going to talk about how we can avoid it or how we can dodge it. But that's probably what drew me, was like the whole strategy part of it as well in a competitive playing field as well.
And that kind of really ties in nicely with like what are the strengths of the army. And I think that's one thing for me has been the flexibility that I've watched Sylvaneth armies being played since it very first got released. I think Rob Symes had put up that video, if I remember correctly, or maybe that was General's Handbook. I remember there was a really big launch campaign around Sylvaneth, and the army lists have changed quite a lot. It's something that's always evolving, so there's a lot of flexibility. But what are the strengths of taking Sylvaneth allegiance?
Movement. Like that is the hugest thing, is their movement. I would never put them in a mixed order army, in my opinion. Like I would never do it.
The trees, everything is written with the trees, the Sylvaneth Wildwoods in mind. Many of the units get buffs, like minuses to hit, for example, for Dryads and Branch Wraiths if they're within 3 of a Wildwood. Spirits of Durthu get D3 extra attacks with their big sword if they're nearby. So the Wildwoods are really key, and you only get the Wildwoods if you take Sylvaneth Allegiance. So it's just such a key part to how the War Scrolls and the army as a whole works, that you need to take Sylvaneth Allegiance, really. There's a few models that could potentially work in mixed order. You're seeing more Alariels with kind of Frostheart Phoenixes because they have the same movement speed. She's a level 3 wizard. She can help buff those Phoenixes. It keeps her alive, that sort of thing. But and she's probably one of the few models in there that doesn't get any sort of bonus from being near a wood. But generally, if you're taking a Sylvaneth army, you want these Sylvaneth Allegiance abilities because they're just really strong.
And just for somebody who hasn't picked up the battle tome yet, the Allegiance ability is what, a free terrain piece? Is it what is it all about?
So you start when the game, before you roll off to pick side, like you roll your scenery and stuff, and before you guys pick sides, before you roll off, you place Citadel Wildwood, which could be 1 to 3 Citadel bases, anything equivalent. So people who make their own homemade stuff, it has to be equivalent because it is quite a big footprint. And you place that anywhere on the board, has to be 1 inch away from other terrain pieces, and you place it, and that's it. That's one of your allegiances. You can teleport through Wildwoods. That's part of your allegiance ability. And you also get access to their artifacts and spell lore as well. And that's pretty much their allegiance ability wrapped up in a box. And pretty much that's it, really. And as Chris said, they're really reliant on the trees. So yeah, so I have, I think, about 7 or 8 bases of trees. That's how much I rely on them. And I generally get them all on the board. And we'll explain later on. But yeah, that's generally the allegiance abilities.
And what are the weaknesses of Sylvaneth? So we talked about movement. I think we've previously mentioned about summoning, and in AOS 2 now that summoning is free. There's a lot of summoning capabilities that we'll talk about soon. But what are some of the weaknesses that I need to either build around or at least accept by taking Sylvaneth Allegiance?
You hate mortal wounds.
Yeah, they have no natural mortal wound save, and the only way of getting one into the army really is there's one command trait which can give you a 6-up. One artifact which can give you a 6-up ward save. So obviously with access to the Malign Sorcery realm artifacts, there's ways to get mortal wound saves, but outside of artifacts they don't have any. So and a lot of the characters are obviously, they have very good armor saves, but they die to mortal wounds quite easily. It's something that the army can actually be quite fragile outside of its woods. If a unit moves off to the side of a board, nowhere near a wood, so it can't escape, most of the units are actually quite slow, and once if they're not within 3 of a wildwood, then they can't teleport away. So they are very, very reliant on the wildwoods. So while the wildwoods give them really good abilities, if you play a smart opponent that knows how to kind of shut down your wildwoods in sense of stopping you from being able to teleport, because every teleport you do you have to end your move at least 9 inches away from any enemy models. So if your opponent kind of can crowd out those wildwoods and make your teleports impossible, it can actually be quite an uphill battle, because they are actually quite a fragile army. And if they can't move around, then they can be quite slow.
Yeah. Pretty much what Chris said.
I know we've spoken in, we've had a really good conversation about the importance of being a 1-drop or, a limited drop army in Sylvaneth. So if I'm a Sylvaneth player and I'm not building a list that is as minimum as I can possibly get, I'm really increasing that chance of a smart player denying me, or taking the first turn and running up the board and trying to block all the good terrain spots for me to summon wildwoods, or stopping that movement shenanigans. So is that a fair assumption as well, that I need to get those drops down as much as possible? Otherwise, that is going to be a weakness.
Yeah.
Yeah, for Sylvaneth, I think it's the most important army to be a 1-drop or possibly 2 drops, depending on an ally choice. But honestly, I wouldn't run anything that wasn't really a 1-drop. It is so vital for them to go first, just to be able to get the wildwoods down onto the table in that first turn while there's still space, because as Liam said, the bases are quite large in terms of those Citadel wood bases, and they always have to be placed at least 1 inch away from any other terrain feature or model, and that includes your own and your opponent's. So finding those spaces on the board once the game starts and models have been deployed and started moving can become very, very hard. So you have to go first, and the fact that your opponent is just going to know you're going to take first turn means that you're always deploying at a bit of a disadvantage, because they can deploy knowing they're going to go second. And especially with one of the scenarios now where you actually score less points if you take the first turn, you're immediately on the back foot in terms of scoring. So relocation orb, first turn, if your opponent can get that objective off you, they're going to get 3 points and you only got 1. Yeah. So that can be a bit of a weakness for them in that they have to be low drops because they have to take that first turn, in my opinion.
And just to unpack something that Liam was talking about, and he said that he normally brings 7 to 8 bases. And, we've only alluded to so far that, at the start of the game, when territories are defined, but, you guys haven't started deploying yet, you get to drop some bases. That's up to 1 to 3 bases that I can drop right at the start. Yep. But just to clarify for our viewers, there are inherent ways to add on additional Wildwoods to the board as the game progresses. Is that correct?
Yes. So there's an artifact. So there's 3-4 different ways. There's Oaken of Ages, which is an artifact that gives you 1 free Wildwood. You don't have to cast a spell. You just drop it down, but it has to be 1 inch away from models and 1 inch away from terrain. And the most important part about this is it has to be within 5 inches of the bearer. So you just can't just plonk it anywhere you want. It has to be 5 inches away from the bearer. And then you got Verdant Blessing, which is a spell in the spell lore. Casting value of 7.
6.
And 6. And then we got the Tree Lord Ancients. And that one, the spell is 1 inch away from terrain and 1 inch away from models. And then we have the Durthu one, which we're not even going to bother talking about because it's useless.
The Tree Lord Ancient.
Yeah, True Ancient, just useless. And then the 4th one is Alariel's spell, Metamorphosis. If it goes off and you kill the enemy unit and you get a Wildwood out of it, that's it. So that's how you get more woods. I wouldn't really rely on Alariel's one, but if you get it off, good on you.
Yeah, Alariel's one's tricky because, again, it still has to be 1 away from other models and terrain, and you have to kill a unit with the spell. So depending on and you have to place the wood where they were standing. So it can be, I don't think I've ever put a wood down from killing something with a Alariel's spell. But the Tree Lord Ancient, the reason Liam's saying it's basically just forget about it is it happens on a 4+ in your hero phase. It's good. It's not a spell. You can do it every hero phase. You could do it per Tree Lord Ancient you had. So it used to be really good, and I would always take one. However, now they've extended the range to 24 inches, but it's the only way of summoning woods to the table that is wholly within. None of the others have to be wholly within, and there's a huge difference with that because of how big those Wildwood bases are. But the main reason that it's pretty much impossible to put it down is that it has to be placed 3 inches away from any other model or terrain feature. And with the size of the Citadel wood base and how much kind of terrain you expect to see on an Age of Sigmar table these days, it's virtually impossible to have a space on the board that you can fit a Citadel wood with at least 3 inches around it before you hit any other terrain feature or model. So I just don't think that it's possible or practical to get one onto the table now using a Tree Lord Ancient.
Yeah, like I used to always take a Tree Lord Ancient just because Naru and also that bonus to the spells, but now since I just keep taking it down, like every FAQ, it just gets worse and worse and worse. I've just gone like, cool, don't need it. Like now he's like the tax of Naru, in my opinion, which we'll explain later on, but he's just generally now a tax.
So I think, from what I'm hearing is that movement's clearly one of the biggest strengths of Sylvaneth. You get this free Sylvaneth Wildwood that is going to really allow you to do some amazing shenanigans. And we probably haven't talked about Awakening the Woods, which we'll get to probably later. But a lot of Sylvaneth is, as I'm going through list design and building my list, I definitely want to think about not just deploying those 1 to 3 pieces, but how can I get more? How can I flood on the board? What are my options? And how do I go about getting the most out of it? But also, as you guys have pointed out, some of them aren't as reliant as some of the others. So maybe let's dig a little bit deeper into that whole list building. So Wildwood's clearly important. Let's start on top with HQ. Let's start talk about heroes. If I'm building my army, what are the types of heroes that I'm going to probably choose, or what should I think about choosing as opposed to some of the others?
Before we get started on this, sorry about the airplane that's flying over. But before we get started, I just want to remind people, it's your hobby. Do rule of cool models. So what we're saying here, don't feel like, oh, it's the best thing ever, but I don't like the models. I myself, when I was doing list building with Welfare for my Harvest Spoon list, which we'll talk about later on, I hate it. I don't like the branch wraith models. So I made my own. So you don't, when we're listening to this, just get some cool creative ideas because you can literally make whatever. But generally, when it comes to heroes, I love Durthu just because he's a nice combat beast and also he's base size is really good when you have a particular trait like Warsinger to extend the trait, and branch wraiths for summoning dryads, and Chris will probably tell you about this tactic, which is his favorite, the branch witch bomb. A branch witch is really good to have, just because you can, if you get the right spells off and the buffs and everything, she can do some serious amount of damage on the battlefield. So those are the heroes that I mainly look at. I no longer look at Tree Lord Ancient. I don't look at Drycha anymore. And I do look at Alariel, but she is a heavy point cost, and you have to build a list around her. That's just my thing with list building when it comes to heroes. Like, those three are the main ones I look at. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think most of my lists now, this is an important thing, I think, to talk about in terms of the changes that Sylvaneth have gone through the editions, through kind of AOS 1 and then now into AOS 2. They've sort of seen a big resurgence coming into AOS 2. They dropped off quite a lot at the end of AOS 1. But now with AOS 2 and summoning being included in their points cost, Alariel has become much more viable now. She has a once per game free summoning mechanic, which generally you're probably bringing about 200 points to the table with extra. So her 600 point cost was quite prohibitive before for a named character. You couldn't give her a command trait, you couldn't give her items. And as we'll talk about more, the artifacts are extremely strong in Sylvaneth, and you have access to a lot of them. So taking a hero that couldn't use one is quite a big downside. But now she effectively is 400 points because she brings 200 odd points to the table through her summon. Her once per game command ability is also incredible. It allows the entire army to reroll to wound. So that's very strong.
Yeah.
She's a level 3 wizard as well, and so now with Malign Sorcery, she has access to, if you have access to realm spells and things like that, she's a level 3 wizard. She moves 16, she has a 3-up save and 16 wounds. She has huge damage output potential as well. So I personally put her in every list right now because I think she's really worth it.
Yeah, I've only put in a couple of lists just because I like the model and stuff, but yeah, Chris has some good points on like why to take her, but I myself, I just haven't gone, I need to take her all the time. So yeah.
But
yeah, Sorry, go, Chris.
In terms of the support heroes, I will never not include at least one Branch Wraith. I think they are the best hero that you can take for their points in the list, because
they're like negative 200 points now because they just summon 10 Dryads a turn.
Yeah, so the spell on their War Scroll lets you set up a unit of 10 Dryads into a Wildwood within range. There's restrictions around that, but the fact that, as Liam said, they can essentially potentially bring on 100 points of Dryads every turn, and they only cost 80 points. For a wizard, they can take an artifact, which you need to be taking at least 2 of the Sylvaneth ones, and then they can also be a model to take a command trait just to have one. In certain builds, you just want a hero that you can use a bubble to be able to charge from a command trait. So I always have a Branch Wraith. The Branch Witch is also a wizard for 80 points. That there's tactics that you can use around them, unless if you're not taking a Branch Witch bomb, as Liam mentioned before, which is around setting up with artifact choices and endless spells a big AoE area of effect mortal wound output from her. I would always just take a Branch Wraith instead of her. But if you want to do that, she can give you some good area of effect mortal wound output that can actually be quite a large area, even though it's on her War Scroll. The base effect size is only 9 inches. But perhaps later on we can go into the in depth of what a Branch Witch bomb is and how you can boost the range using certain endless spells in the list and things like that. But generally, I don't take the Tree Lord Ancient anymore, and I don't take Drycha because of the fact she's a named character, and I don't think she has the survivability or the benefits that Alariel has.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Alariel is a significant points investment. So at this time of recording, I think she's 600 points. Yes, you get a free unit from her. However, to take up essentially 1/3 of my army, if I'm building a traditional 2,000 point army, I'm restricting other parts of my build. So something to consider. But as you guys have said as well, the Branch Wraith does allow me to bring on 10 Dryads a turn. So it is a spell, so not every Branch Wraith is going to be able to bring on 10 Dryads a turn. but by increasing the amount of branch wraiths I have, it's going to give me flexibility to choose which Wildwood or where I bring them on, or if I played Liam recently and I sniped off one of his branch wraiths, he still had the tactical ability to had 2 other ones that he could bring on those additional units. So something to consider.
Yeah. And yeah, it's just like 10 Dryads a turn. Like, let's just say that one Dryad's alive for 4 turns. You have now put on 400 points on the table just in that game, and she has 80 points. She's just amazing.
Yeah. Anything else we want to talk about with heroes for now?
Yeah, just as I said, Durthu is a really good combat beast. If you need a combat one, he's definitely the way to go. And also, he's a huge, nice target for your opponent. It's like, if you want to distract your opponent, like, you should just throw him in. I know in our game, Anthony, you're like, why'd you throw Durthu in? I'm like, if he's gone, I'm not all that fussed, because like I still have all the ball control, just because he's a nice beating stick.
Yeah, and maybe let's unpack Durthu just a little bit. So if I am looking for that combat beast, why is Durthu considered a potential combat beast?
So people may know Durthu as a Durthu, so we'll explain why it's a maybe combat beast. But so Durthu, his big sword is actually the strongest sword in the game. It's damage 6. No other sword in the game is anything more than 3.
So straight 6 damage.
Straight 6 damage when he's in full health. Then it goes down to D6 and then down to D3. Just want to make that clarify. Just, it's not always 6. And also he has a shooting range attack, which is really cool. Similar to a Kurnoth Hunter, but shorter range. So when you're teleporting, it doesn't really matter because you're 9 away, and then you can just extend that range.
It's 15-inch range, yep.
Yep. So it's just half. So yeah, pretty much sweet. And then he's 12 wounds, 3 up save. And he also has a massive impaling talon. But the cool thing is that you want Durthu around your Wildwoods, because with his Guardian Sword, he gains power from gaining D3 extra attacks. So you could potentially do 6 attacks, hitting on 3s, wounding on 3s, -2 rend, 6 damage on full health. That is super strong, because not a lot of people might have a save. If you want to wipe out a horde, go for it. Like, does some serious damage. And if you've got a hero that you're trying to target, let's just say a Troll Hag, for example. If I get down that Troll Hag to like 6 or less wounds, and that massive impaling talon also did a wound, on a 4 or more or 5 or more maybe, I can just auto slay you. So Durthu is a really good combat beast. And when you add in Malign Sorcery artifacts like Gear Strike, making him get +1 to hit and +1 to wound, 2s and 2s, -2 rend, 6 damage, that's messed up. Just straight up messed up. So that's why he's a potential combat beast, but there's sometimes he just doesn't do it. So yeah, that's why he's a potential combat beast. Yeah.
So I think what's really cool if I'm a Sylvaneth player is there's no one way to build my army. I've got Alariel, I've got Durthu, I've got a whole range of characters. I'm not restricted. So some really cool ways to start theming my army. We then kind of dig into the battle line, and we started talking about Dryads, which, if you're not Sylvaneth Allegiance, is the only battle line option. But if we take Allegiance, we've got some other options. So how do you guys like to build your battle line choices?
Dryads.
And then summon some Dryads.
And summon some Dryads, yeah. Dryads. They are up there as the best battle line choice in like, when you look at everyone else's like Allegiance abilities and stuff, they are pretty messed up for what they can do.
Chris, are you the same? Are you a Dryad man, or you go down the other routes?
Dryads. All of the 2 main, I guess, Wargrove battalions that I focus on both utilize the Forest Folk battalion, and you have to take at least 3 units of Dryads in that, so that's immediately my battle line sorted. I think model count is really important. The fact that they're naturally -1 to hit if just one model in the unit is within 3 inches of a Wildwood, and that's both shooting and combat, is incredible. You can string them out and still be negatives to hit. In big units, particularly, if there's at least 12, you get +1 to save. So they're then on a 4-up save. If you put them in your woods, they're getting cover. So they're then on a 3-up save.
That is amazing.
-1 to hit. They make 2 attacks each, and they have range 2. so they can actually do a lot of attacks, especially once you start putting them into some of the battalions and you consider the bonuses that we can get onto later. I think Dryads are the way to go. That being said, I don't think that the Spite-Revenants and the Tree-Revenants are useless. They have to be taken in certain battalions. I mean, Liam always used to go down the Tree-Revenant route right at the start in AOS 1.
Unit 10 is the way to go.
And I think they can still work. I just think people are realizing that I think points for points and wounds and number of models you get, I think the Dryads are your best option.
Yep. And Dryads are incredibly tough. I mean, again, as this is being recorded, you can put down a Sylvaneth Wildwood on an objective. You then summon up a bunch of Dryads in that Wildwood, and it is very hard to get them off that with all the minuses and the additional saves, and they are rock hard objective holders.
Yep. That's why they're just Dryads. Like, every time I'm writing a list now, I'm just going to see how many I can fit. Like, how many Dryads can I fit?
Let's assume someone's taking a formation that requires them to take Sprite Revs or Tree Revs. What's benefits?
So let's go with the Tree Rev route, because I use them heaps. And as Anthony, you might remember when I played Naru, Tree Revs were the biggest pain in the butt for you to deal with. They usually just come in and just annoy the crap out of you. With your free guild and stuff. And I know other people, when they played me with Naru, they really hated the Tree Revs for what they did. So for Tree Revs, I wouldn't run a unit of 5, even though that's their bare minimum amount. I would run 10, just because they have a 6-inch pile-in, which is super strong. Like, most things with 3 inches, it's mostly 3 inches. So having that 6-inch pile-in is super strong when you're trying to get that particular character out. They have built-in rend, and they can just potentially wipe out a character on foot by themselves for 160 points. It's just like, cool, go in, do it, and they can teleport with the Hornblower or the Musician, teleport anywhere on the board, not just within Wildwoods, anywhere on the board edge, which is super strong. So if like your opponent literally moved a bit too far forward and they left a support hero, let's say Hag Queen, like since Doors of Cain are very prominent in the meta at the moment, left that Hag Queen at the back, just teleport over, take her out. So
just to unpack that one really quickly, if I've taken those Sprite Revs, Tree Revs, am I restricted to when I can teleport them around the board, or is it like turn 1 only, or
any turn you want?
So it's great for like
any of your turns, any of your turns.
So do you guys find it's a valuable tool to maybe like a late objective kind of challenger, teleport to the back, especially for some of those scenarios that maybe like Knife to the Heart, where you kind of you hold both objectives, you automatically win, or some of those ones that like the objective, like Border War, where the objective in my deployment zone is worth more than your one. Is that like, how do you guys find that?
They were amazing for those scenarios. They always, when I was playing Naru, always won me the game near the end. They were like late game winners, grabbing that objective and stuff. Yeah, it's just any of my movement phases, just teleport wherever I need to be. As people started playing me more and stuff, they started realizing to hold back a bit, which was good because then they're like, you're pushing your opponent back and not moving them forward. So they're just awesome threat. Similar to like how we have Stormcast, who can just teleport anywhere on the board. And you got the Harpies now from Doors of Cain and stuff. So that kind of threat is looming in people's head, like that backboard edge. So yeah, they were just amazing for what they did.
They are useful. In terms of objective grabbing, they are limited somewhat by the fact that you have to teleport to board edges to be Wildwoods. But assuming you're trying to get somewhere where you don't have a Wildwood, you have to teleport and every model has to be within 6 of the board edge. And generally, I don't think there's any scenarios where an objective will be that close to the board edge, so you won't be in range. You won't be able to teleport and be in range. You'd have to teleport and then try and make a charge, which with changes like endless spells and things like that, particularly Chronomantic Cogs and the Warsinger command trait, which is a 10-inch bubble of +1 to charge, that can combo really nicely actually with Tree Revenants, because they have once per turn they can change a dice roll for the unit. So they can re-roll it. No, they can change re-roll.
It's a re-roll.
Yeah, they can re-roll the dice. So you're suddenly looking at maybe a 6-inch charge but you can re-roll one of your charge dice. So if you get a 5 on one of them or something, you're pretty much golden. So it can then help you to teleport somewhere. If they've left a hero back, great, because that's what you need to get onto the objective by using your charge distance to cover that gap. And then you kill the hero and you take the objective. So they can be the one thing that lets you get an objective where you couldn't place a Wildwood. So they do have their uses.
Yeah, awesome. Also like to add in that they're probably one of the only units that are under 100 points that have inbuilt rend.
So we're talking here some good flexibility, something that other units that you can choose aren't going to be offering, especially if you're looking for that teleport shenanigans. I know, when you used to play with those, Liam, it was this multi threat where I knew you were going to come from the Wildwoods from the front, but I always had that concern that you were going to bring those units from my backfield, and then all of a sudden, if I've moved too far, I can't defend my objective. But if I hang back and kind of wait for that threat, then I'm not advancing up the board, and you're going to be taking objectives from the front anyway. So that making me force decisions was always a very valuable asset that I felt you had.
Yeah, and that's why I ran. And as I said, unit of 10. It's just awesome. Just the 6-inch pile in.
Yeah, awesome. Let's talk other units. Other units that I can take, and are there ones that you prefer?
So I guess the other battleline unit is the Spite-Revenants. You didn't really see these much before because, again, this is one of the reasons why Sylvaneth has become much more prevalent since AOS 2 with the recent changes, is that they made Spite-Revenants battleline in a Sylvaneth army. So now there's one of the full kind of Wargrove battalions is the Dreadwood, and as part of that you have to take at least 4 units of Spite-Revenants. Now when they weren't fulfilling your battle line, so you still had to take at least 3 units of Tree Revenants or Dryads as well, it was just too many points to make the army viable. Now that 4 units of Spite-Revenants more than fulfills your battle line requirements, you can run Dreadwoods, and Dreadwood has some awesome rules. It's a very strong Alpha Strike army if you want it to be, but it can also shut down ranged armies. So you've seen a lot of Dreadwoods suddenly start appearing on the scene because lots of people, myself included, really like the Spite-Revenant models, and I always wanted to run a Dreadwood, but it wasn't really competitively viable. So just by making that simple change of allowing you to have them as a battle line option, it suddenly massively opened up the options for the army. They're not, a lot of people still look past them, but I actually think they're very good for 70 points for 5. They have 3 attacks each that are 4s and 4s, sure, but it's quite a lot of attacks. But the main thing is they've got 2 rules. One is -1 bravery to enemy units within 3 inches of them, and then the next is that they haunt terrain. So any terrain feature within 8 inches of any Spite-Revenants is haunted. So any enemy unit taking a battle shock test within 3 of any haunted piece of terrain has to roll 2 dice and use the highest result. So that can be game changing, especially against elite kind of models like Stormcast, Dracoline, Cav, or something like that. If you're talking about they might lose a model on a 6, but they won't lose it on anything else. They roll a 1 and they think they're great, but you say, oh no, you need to roll 2 dice, and then one of them pops up a 6. They're now losing a model, and that's huge. So I think that can be really useful for just kind of dotting them around a bit, and just having them chilling out in Wildwoods where they can't be shot because the Wildwoods are blocking line of sight. They can hold objectives. They're haunting the terrain the whole time. So I think they've definitely got their uses. Even outside of Dreadwood, I still would put in the occasional unit in any other Wargrove, because the joy with most of the Sylvaneth armies is that they will be 1 drop and you can fulfill the rest of your army with any Sylvaneth units you want. So you can just drop a unit of 5 Spite-Revenants into it if you want. So I think they're still a really good unit.
What about Kurnoth? So it's probably, I know it's not a battle line unit, and it's probably the only other, correct me if I'm wrong, unit we haven't spoken about. And I think for me as an outsider, I always see the discussion of, do I arm my Kurnoths with swords, scythes, or bows? Obviously the bows are clearly a shooting attack. The scythes and the swords, pros and cons from a combat point of view. What do you guys think about Kurnoths? What do you choose? What scenarios, and why would you use the different types of Kurnoths?
I love Kurnoths. What are we on about? I love them. They are still by far my favorite unit in the book. I just want to quickly say, I know Chris is going to disagree with me on this, but I find now with the new Sylvaneth Wildwood rules, which we have not mentioned, Wildwoods now block line of sight. We forgot to mention that. They block line of sight. So any shooting, you can read it on the FAQs, but the best way to explain it is if someone draws an imaginary 1mm line to the middle of their base to something that's in a wildwood or near, like, or crossing a wildwood, they can't see them unless they fly.
Yeah.
Right.
Or you have a shooting attack that doesn't require line of sight. So when we played, I had the Squig Gobber, which doesn't require line of sight. And
you can still target them. So with Kurnoth Hunters at the moment, with their shooting, like the Kurnoth Great Bows, you generally want them in cover. So you're blocking their line of sight. So I don't find them any use at the moment in the current rule set. Like, that's just my opinion. I know Chris is going to probably bring up a point of why to have them. I can already see it in his face. He's like, they're going like, Liam, you're saying something stupid, but that's just my honest opinion.
So Kurnoth shooting is good, but we've got to be conscious of the Wildwoods and not blocking ourselves is essentially what you're saying.
Not blocking yourselves. So that's why for me, most of my lists are all about combat. The only shooting I have is Durthu, just because it's a nice bonus to shoot, if that makes sense. Like, be like, cool. I run Scythes, one, because they look beautiful. They just look cool. And also -2 rend D3 damage is amazing when let's say Durthu's dead. Let's just say Durthu got shot off to pieces. I still have -2 rend on the table, with either 15 wounds or 30, depending on the unit size that I've picked. -2 rend, so I can still rip into elite forces or heroes, while the Dryads and branch wraiths can't do much against that. They're just bodies on the board. So that's why I run Scythes. Just because bodies, but some people like running swords because constant 2 damage compared to D3 from -2 rend.
So consistency versus potential is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Well, it depends on like your current meta. Like if you've got heaps of high armored armies, such as like Stormcast who are buffed on a 2-up save, I would take Scythes any day. Compared to swords, which -1 rend, 2 damage is still pretty good. More attacks as well. But it's 1-inch range compared to 2. So if you're running a big unit of 6, all those sides are going to be in. But if you're running a 6 of swords, they're not all going to be in, if that makes sense. So that's why you probably run unit 3 swords and then unit 6 sides, because the unit 6 sides are literally going to churn through whatever they touch. So yeah.
Chris, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think in terms of the combat options, I think in AOS 1 I would have always said sides because of, as Liam said, I think Rend 2 is very important. However, I do think there is a lot more ethereal units in the game now, particularly with Nighthaunt, but also because of a lot of Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragons with ethereal amulets and things like that. There's a lot more things in the game now that are ignoring Rend. So I personally now think the swords are a better option. It's a consideration I make that I have Rend and no Rend. I try to have as much variation in rend across my army as possible. So generally, I'm always putting in Alariel into my armies. She has rend 2 from both her combat and her shooting attack. So I consider that my rend 2. I have all my Dryads as my battle line. They don't have rend. So then having rend 1 on the swords, I think that's fine. Because then if I play something that ignores my rend, okay, they're only ignoring rend 1 rather than ignoring rend 2. I always get 2 damage on the swords rather than D3, and I'll always choose a flat 2 over a D3. I prefer the consistency, and they also get an additional attack over the sides. So I personally prefer the swords now in terms of the combat option, but I think I still my play style and what I would choose, the role Kurnoth Hunters for me fill is that they are defensive rather than aggressive, because they're quite weak when they're not in cover and they're not bunkered down, which Liam didn't mention, is they have this incredible rule to re-roll their armor saves, but you have to declare in your opponent's charge phase that they're bunkering down, and then it allows you to re-roll your saves. You declare in the charge phase. So your turn, if you don't want to charge, you can re-roll your armor saves if you're already in combat. And then in your opponent's turn, if you're going to be charged by them, you can choose to re-roll your armor saves. But you only get to pile in 1 inch. Yeah. But they start with a 4-up save. So if you have them in a wood, they're on a 3-up re-rollable save. So and they're 5 wounds each. So even just a unit of 3, it's so hard to go through them because they have a 3-up rerollable armor save and there's 15 wounds. So I like the bows because you can just sit them somewhere and they're 30-inch range and they're rend 1, damage D3, 2 shots each. They're very, very swingy, but when they go off, they go off. And Ilarial being included in the list, that once per game reroll wounds is across everything, shooting and combat. So it really helps to kind of buff them. And you can, the most important thing is staying in or near your Wildwoods, and you get to do that with the bows. Whereas, so you can always have the rerolls. Whereas if you charge in with something like Kurnoth swords or sides, you won't get the rerolls on that turn you charge, and they can actually become quite weak. And then you're generally running out of your Wildwoods, so you're not getting the benefits of being able to teleport away again. So that's why I prefer the flexibility of the bows.
Anything else you want to add to that, Liam?
Nah, he's pretty much nailed it. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Like I think for me, there's a lot of flexibility, and I've seen a few Ilarial players will use the Kurnoths to be that one summoned unit once per game. And if I'm going down that route, I've got the flexibility of having scythes, swords, or bows that will work to my whoever I'm playing. So if I have got a Nighthorn army in front of me, I can pull out something that the swords, for example. But if I've got a high armor Stormcast, I might go down the scythe route. So there's a lot of flexibility, and it's one thing I've loved about Kurnoths is that it's one unit, but there's 3 different ways of playing them, and they're such a great kit.
Yeah. And also, they're cool kits, awesome models. I just run sides just because they look cool. That's just my honest taste of it. I do own 24 Kurnoth Hunters, I think still, yeah. And I have a variety of everything, depending whatever list, but at the moment, I just run sides. Yeah.
So yeah, I think the great thing is they're a really cool looking unit. And again, they can be played flexibly. Exactly like you said, you can take one unit but run it 3 completely different ways. So it's an army that you can tailor to how you play. You can play full aggro combat style, or you can play sit back defensive shooting. You can still play defensive combat if you want, and just force people to come to you with maybe a branch witch bomb that's hiding behind it, and you make them come and get you. Ilarial can throw a spear from 30 inches away that people can't ignore. So I think you can still use combat ones defensively as well. So I think they're a great unit. They went up a little bit, but I think 200 is the sweet spot for them in terms of points. I think it's appropriate.
I think they went some 180 first edition General's Handbook, and then they bumped up to 220. That was quite a drastic change, and I think that's when we started seeing them not being in much lists now. It was mainly about bodies getting Dryads on the table and stuff. And then also I can kind of compare them to Skyfires, which were cheaper but did more damage.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is ridiculous. And then so now going down to 200, it's that nice even balance where I think 180 they were a bit too cheap for what they could do in that current edition and where the game was at. A lot of people were saying they were broken. I remember my Narut, I had 15 at one time in my army. I was like, this is messed up. It was all about minimum battle line and just spam Kurnoth Hunters. I think it was the Kurnoth Hunter spam meta, where everyone just had as many Kurnoth Hunters and Durthu they could fit in. And
I think it was like a couple, maybe a unit of bows and then like 1 to 2 units of 6. So
sides, yeah. It was a lot of bodies, like a lot of Kurnoth Hunter bodies where everyone's like, this is overwhelming because there's so many wounds. So 200 points, I think, is perfect amount. The time of we're recording this, 200 points is a nice balance. They're not too low and they're not too high, especially in the current like meta that we're in at the moment. So yeah, but we look at 270 points for Witch Elves. Yeah.
Oh. So this probably is a bit of a combo question. 1, I wanted to ask about allies, and 2, I wanted to ask about battalions. And a lot of your battalions allows you to choose allies, and there's some quite fun things you can do, which I'll let you guys explain. So I guess let me open that up. Well, from a battalion point of view, what do you like? What are some of the ways we can build armies, and then what does some of them allow you to do?
You want to go, Chris, first? Because I was going to talk about...
I was going to say, high level, I think there's 4 or 5 different builds you can do at the moment that all utilize, they're all 1-drops if you want them to be. So you've got Narut, which encompasses a household. You've got Winterleaf, which encompasses a forest folk. You've got Harvest Boon, which encompasses a forest folk. You've got Dreadwood, which encompasses an outcast battalion. And then I still think you've also got Ironbark, which again encompasses a household battalion. So I would just say they are the 5 viable Uber 1-drop battalions, and I think they can all be competitive and they can all win a tournament. And then I'll let Liam go into the detail.
Yeah. So with Ironbark, for example, I remember when Chris and I recorded a Sylvaneth episode way back. I was doing my Ironbark experimenting, as I like to call it. Ironbark was based off the household, but if you ever get the battle time, guys, the household is based on a tree lord, a branch witch, and 1 unit of tree revs. But to get Ironbark, you need to run 2 units of tree revs. And what this gives is rerolling 1s to wound with tree revs, and that's generally it. But what you can get is 2 Dryad units, anything with a Dryad keyword. Now, this is a huge thing because in allies, they actually never ally in with any Dryad army. So they're not allied in with Caradron, Fire Slays, or anything. So if you want dwarves, if you like short, stumpy men, and you like trees at the same time, Ironbark's the way to go. I think we both agreed that Caradron Overlords was a good add into it. Sorry for the plan again, guys. Due to they have rend, they got strong shooting. Like I'm pretty sure I ran unit 30 Arcanaut Company with a chemist, with all skyhooks, and that did some serious damage. It was to the point where I literally was pointing at heroes and monsters. I'm like, I'm just going to target that, and people were just taking them off the board because it was so strong. And they were a perfect replacement for Kurnoth Hunters in the back line, where they're just hanging at the back, shooting, lobbing shots at my opponent, and just taking out damage, like taking out whatever was in front of them. And I also had a Drycha, I think, at the time, and she was just killing hordes. So you can do some cool stuff with it as well. So that's Ironbark in a nutshell.
So if I'm someone who's thinking about maybe on a dispossessed force or a Fire Slayer force or KO, and I want to kind of transition, this is a nice blend.
Perfect blend. It's generally the 2 Dryad units is like 1 standard unit, like Arcanaut Company, your Hrothgar Berserkers, or your Warriors, or etc., and 1 hero to buff that unit. So they're like their own little force within another force, and it's still 1 drop. If that makes sense. They don't synergize well with Sylvaneth stuff, but they're really cool just to add a bit of character into it.
Yeah. The other main thing, to be honest, that the household battalion gives, which is what you should never forget, because you'll see it all the time in Nalroot, is enemy units can't retreat from household units. So once a household unit gets into combat with you, you can't retreat unless you've got some special mechanic that allows you to move out of combat that isn't a retreat. You're going to be stuck there. So you're seeing you used to see Tree Lord Ancients teleporting in that were ignore rend 1, get down to maybe a 2-up save, rolling 1s, pinning the end of the horde and just holding it there for the entire game. You see less of it now because you have to attack. So a smart player will just remove casualties if you hit hard enough. And then pull themselves out of combat that way. But it's a really amazing ability that shouldn't forget about, that's part of the household battalion. So yeah, Ironbark I think is probably the one you will see least though. As Liam said, we kind of talked about it as the best place to put a big unit of Arcanauts with skyhooks, but now the Wildwoods blocking line of sight I think does hamper that build somewhat. So then the other battalion that uses the household is Nalroot, and this is probably the one that most Sylvaneth players have come up against. It was definitely the Sylvaneth army that was 90% of the time the one you would see in AOS 1. That is changing a lot now. I think Harvest Boon and Winterleaf are taking over, but you still do see a lot of Nalroot builds. Nalroot is the build to go to if you like magic, because basically your Tree Lord Ancients, your Branch Wraiths, and your Branch Witches all get to cast and unbind an additional spell. And with Malign Sorcery, just having 80-point wizards being able to cast 2 spells from your Branch Wraiths and your Branch Witches, that's incredibly strong. So if you want to go down the route of lots and lots of spells to try and set off the Wildwoods, it's probably the other thing we forgot to mention about the Wildwoods.
I was just going to say, we probably haven't unpacked that one. So maybe we pause for a second. What does that mean?
Yeah, so if a spell is cast within 6 inches of a wildwood,
Is that my spell, your spell, or both spells?
Doesn't matter. Any spell.
Any magic cast near a wildwood.
Yep, within 6 inches, and then it doesn't matter if it gets unbound, but if it was successfully cast, then you roll a dice, and on a 5-up, the wildwoods get roused by magic, and basically any non-Sylvaneth unit within 1 inch of that wildwood takes D3 mortal wounds.
Yeah.
Which if I pause that for a second, that's massive. When we think about right at the start, you know, you both mentioned about the importance of having wildwood bases. You know, Liam mentioned that he would normally bring 7 to 8, and I'm sure, Chris, you have a similar number, that you're dropping as many bases as possible, and we're focusing on getting that first turn to drop as many bases as possible. Let's assume we've got 5 to 6, 7 bases on the table by turn 1 or turn 2.
Yeah,
we've got such a big opportunity that a successfully cast spell, whether it's unbound or not, is going to do serious damage to non-Sylvaneth armies.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's a reason that I like Alariel even more now, because she has such a big base size. What I will usually try and do is tail 3 separate wildwoods. If you imagine almost like the top half of a sun with rays of sunlight, where you've got one this way, and one up in the middle, and those 3 tails all meet to a point where they're within 6 inches of Alariel's base, kind of at the bottom. If she's the center of the sun, and the wildwoods are kind of the rays of sunlight going off from that, so her base is within 6 inches of 3 separate wildwoods. If you cast Chronomantic Cogs and rewind time, she can cast 4 spells. You can potentially do so much damage across the entire board if you get those spells off and you roll those 5-ups, because every time you cast a spell, you're rolling a 5-up for each wildwood, so you're rolling 3 dice. So every single time you should set off a wood. So if you cast all 4 spells, you should set off those woods at least 4 times. So the mortal wound output that you can do just from Alariel, and if you take a Gnarlroot army where you're doing 2 spells from a Tree Lord Ancient, 2 spells from a Branch Wraith, another 2 from a Branch Wraith, another 2 from a Branch Witch, you can potentially just wipe the board, especially against an elite army that doesn't have good mortal wound saves. Stormcast, for example, Stormcast heroes and things like that, it will just go through them.
Wow. So really thinking about getting as many trees, the importance of priority, and getting that first round. You're starting to kind of see, as we're talking about Sylvaneth more, the importance of building your force around maximizing this allegiance ability, which is about the wildwood.
Another thing we forgot to mention about wildwoods is old school deadly.
Yeah,
we forgot about that. So pretty much if a unit runs or charges through or lands on a wildwood, for each model, not just the unit, each model you have to roll a dice for. On a roll of a 1, that model is slain. This does not work for heroes and monsters. So we'll explain tactics in the end of like how I kind of like force my opponent to do it, if that makes sense. Like I know, Anthony, you've gone across it where I've kind of like put all my models in a way where you pretty much, if you want to charge me, you have to go through it. Like I'm tempting you to get into it. So that's another thing we forgot to add in, something really cool to add in with wildwoods, and shows you how important they are in the army and why, if you want Sylvaneth, just run Sylvaneth Allegiance, because they're just so powerful.
Yeah. Look, if for me, and you know, I think this is the mastery of Sylvaneth, is a really good Sylvaneth player knows how to use their bases to maximize their position. You know, a good use of Sylvaneth bases will really put you in a strong position to win, but a really poor use of the wildwood bases can really hamper you, and it stops your movement. It really, you know, minimizes the abilities that you have inherently built into your force. So if you're playing against Sylvaneth, you've got to stop them as much as possible. You've got to dispel those casts. You've got to keep an eye out for, you know, not casting too closely to those bases, but at the same time, you've got to think about strategies that if we put down Dryads or something like a Kurnoth Hunter and there's a wood around an objective, how are you going to get that objective off that opponent, knowing that they're so hard to take away? And if you charge, you might lose models. If you cast spells, you might damage yourself. Mastery of those bases, boys, am I right? Is that critical for a Sylvaneth player?
Yep.
Yeah, I think so. And sorry, Liam, but that's the real reason I think I don't like the combat Kurnoth Hunter build where you're charging away, because to get the most out of your allegiance abilities, it's all about making your opponent come to you. You put those woods down on the objectives and you force your opponent to come to you. Not only are they charging into the woods, possibly losing models just from the charging and running at you, but then they're in your kill zone essentially for when you then have your next hero phase and you cast all your spells and you set those Wildwoods off. And also, if you're playing a gun line, you hide behind those trees, you can't be shot off. Whereas if you take 6 sides in a Durthu, you put a tree down and then you teleport to it, and then you charge away from it, in front of it, straight into your opponent. Great for them, because you're not blocking their line of sight. They don't have to go anywhere near your Wildwoods to kill your models. You can't get away from them. You're basically just taking away the benefits of your own allegiance ability if you do that. So I think fight in the trees. As Leonidas said, fight in the shade, and the shade is in the trees.
I kind of like, with me, when it comes to combat things, like, it all depends on my opponent in a way. Like, I would generally, like, I remember when, like, I think it was like near end of AOS 1 when I was like slowly cutting off Sylvaneth, I was playing super defensively, where I had my Kurnoth Hunters in cover and stuff. But when you have list builds such as Harvest Boon, where it's about +4 to charge, like, use it. Like, you have paid points for it, if that makes sense, to get that +4 charge. And also, it all depends on the player that I'm playing against. If I just want to hold my opponent there and just be like, hey, I don't feel like much of a threat is happening. I do know when I was at Masters, I was just charging people in just so I can hold them in their thing. Because I'm like, you can't answer this to me. You don't have an answer for this. And if I can do it, do it. But if I have an opponent that goes, I have an answer for it, I don't want to get close to you. I want to make you work for it. So that was when I started, like, putting Dryads and stuff behind the objective, being like behind trees and stuff, being like, cool, if you want that objective, you have to move, then charge to get more bodies on. And you would have to die. And also there's Dryads that you have to kill to outnumber. So, like, as I said, like, we all play differently. But like, when I come to looking at the Kurnoth Hunter and Durthu builds that I have, I paid points for Combat Beast and I want to use it. I use it. And I do block line of sight a lot. Like, I do know I've pissed some people off when it comes to, like, they go, I'm going to target Durthu. I'm like, no, you can't. Like, you can't see him. So, yeah.
I think that comes back to, one of the initial points is that Sylvaneth is such a flexible army that there are so many different ways of building this force. And, you mentioned it, Liam, and you said, the rule of cool. If you like Alariel and you want Kurnoth with bows, there are so many ways you can optimize that within Sylvaneth. But if you want combat, if you want to be running, this combo Duarden, if you in Idoneth Deepkin, there is a allegiance. So there's a formation that allows you to have Sylvaneth and Deepkin. There's so many different ways you can run this army. It's incredibly cool. That's what I love about it. It's just flexible. And, if you are a tournament player and you're chasing the meta, quote unquote, there are so many different ways you can build and play to the meta. But if you just want to build and play with your own models, there's so many different ways you can do it. Awesome.
Yeah, agreed.
Liam, what do you think about some of the others? So we touched on a few of the others. What about things like Winterleaf? And I don't think we touched Dreadwood yet. That were some of the others that are becoming quite popular.
I think Winterleaf and Dreadwood will get Chris to talk about, because he's turned up to tournaments with those and he's been super competitive with them. I think we should talk about Harvest Boon. Harvest Boon, let's talk about that, because I think Chris is currently just fixing something up. So Harvest Boon is based on Forest Folk. So it's about Branch Wraith. So Forest Folk is, the base of Forest Folk is 1 Branch Wraith and 3 units of Dryads. Harvest Boon says you have to have 2 or more, 2 to 5, I think it is, of Branch Wraiths, or 2 to 3 Branch Wraiths, one of that numbers, but you got to have more than 1. And so that's pretty much it. What Harvest Boon gives you is +1 to your run and charges and +1 to your casting for Branch Wraiths only. So you've now made the Branch Wraiths super amazing, and there's buffs with artifacts and stuff where you can make it even better, where you can make 1 Branch Wraith at +3 to cast. So getting that Wildwood on the thing where it's on a 7, you just got it. Going on a 6, you got it pretty much good. So pretty much Harvest Boon, like the kind of combo that I go with is have Durthu with a War Singer trait, which is +1 to charge. So now you've made a natural +2 to charge, 10-inch bubble, and adding Chromatic Cogs for +4. So now when you teleport through the Wildwoods and you're 9 away from your opponent, you just need a 5 or more. That's it. And a 5-inch charge is so much easier than a 9-inch charge.
Yeah.
And since you got those command points that you got from the battalions and stuff, you are just can go cool, I'm gonna reroll, and you just into your opponent's face. And I think in Masters I ran 2 units of 30 and 1 unit of 10 Dryads. And 2 units of 30 Dryads, no one had his answer for really. Like everyone just went like, I turned through one, shit, I got another one. Can't do it. And since you're summoning heaps, because you got the +1 to cast now with the Harvest Boon, you just keep generating 10 bodies. And you just keep teleporting into your opponent's face, just going like, here you go. Like, do you have an answer for now? Another 10, and your opponent's just like, I can't be bothered. So
just continuous wave of just pure
Dryads.
bodies. Yeah.
So
combining it with Ranu's Lamentary and Arcane Terrain, you're on +3 to summon Dryads, +4 to cast Sylvaneth Spells. So it's physically impossible if you get Arcane Terrain to fail the cast of Verdant Blessing to summon a wood in Harvest Moon with Ranu's Lamentary, because it casts on a 6 and you've got +4. So you can't fail to cast that spell. And then once you've cast it in your first turn, you're at +3 to summon Dryads. So you're summoning Dryads every turn on a 4. It's really good.
Yeah. And while we're talking about summoning Dryads, maybe this is some good advice for players. How many Dryads would you guys normally have up your sleeve to summon in an average 2K battle?
30.
Yeah.
Why 30? Is that because you're expecting some to die? Is that the maximum people would summon?
If we're looking at the game, for example, so turn 1 you would summon 10, turn 2 summon another 10, turn 3 summon another 10, right? Turn 4 and 5, I'm pretty sure either your opponent's even answered to the branch wave problem, or you've got now enough bodies where you can just summon and you want to cast other spells, such as like either Arcane Bolt to take out that hero or that unit that's now seriously wounded, or cast Mystic. Like there's other spells that you want to play later in the game just to like do some damage later on. Like I know like in some games now, turn 4 or 5, I'm just playing Arcane Bolt. Like I'm not casting to summon Dryads. I'm just going to get Arcane Bolt or do a Mystic Shield or do something, some damage or some buff where whatever I have left is going to survive to win the game, because your opponent probably doesn't have an answer to all the extra bodies. So they're probably seriously outnumbered already. And you're just going to go nuts. And also, if you're summoning 10 Dryads on turn 4 and 5, they're not going to, like especially turn 5, they're not going to do anything. Like they're not going to teleport and do any shenanigans, because once they're set up on that Wildwood that you've now summoned them on, they can't teleport in the following movement phase. So they're just stuck there. And same with 2 and 4, where you might just teleport them on turn 5, but like...
You might be summoning late game to hold an objective, but definitely the wave attack that you were talking about earlier...
it's 1, 2, and 3.
Really 1, 2, and 3. You want to get those max bodies out and then play defense.
To be honest, in a perfect world, you'd have 50. But I think from experience of playing the army enough, and as Liam said, the situations, the restrictions on summoning them, I have never needed... I don't think I've ever done it more than 3 times in a game, just because you've either lost your branch rate so you can't do it. As Liam said, you always have to summon them wholly within a Wildwood, and then they can't then move. So it's actually impossible to cast the spell at the same individual Citadel Wood base anyway, 2 turns in a row, because the first turn you can just fit 10 into a Citadel Wood base, and you can't then teleport them away. So you have no chance to move them before your next hero phase, and they have to be 9 away. So if your opponent sent troops in and killed them, yes, there might be space for you to put another 10 in, but you can't summon them there because they have to be set up 9 away from enemy models. So you just will not be able to, unless you've got loads and loads and loads of bases that aren't being filled, that your opponent isn't coming anywhere near, and you've always got a branch wraith close to that Wildwood to set them up, you just won't realistically get more than 3 units down across a 5-turn game.
Exactly.
So note to self, buy a bunch of Wildwood bases, make sure I've got a good amount, 5 to 8.
8, I think, is perfect.
8's the number.
It's the number.
Yeah. All right, so I'm going to Games Workshop. I'm buying 8 bases, and I need to have at least 30 Kurnoth. I say 30 Kurnoth. So yeah, right. That's a big battle. I want 30 Dryads, unless I plan to summon more Dryads from Alariel.
And so let's just say this right. Most of the lists we're probably going to talk about is we're probably, tell me if I'm wrong here, Chris, but you're probably going to have around 60 plus Dryads at the start of the table. Correct?
Yeah, if you want to play Sylvaneth at the top of their competitive ability at the moment, maximizing summoning and being prepared for it, I would bring 100 Dryads combined in what's in your list and the extras to put on the table, especially with Alariel. Even if you're taking minimum Forest Folk, I'd say that's 1 unit of 30 and 2 10s. Then with Alariel, you're bringing on 20, and then there's your 30 that you want for your branch rates across 5 turns. So if you can get to 100 Dryads, I think that's where you're at for competitive play.
All right, sweet spot is 100 Dryads, whether I'm buying them, whether I'm summoning them. That's the sweet spot.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Chris, you're back, and I wanted to talk to you about Dreadwood and Winterleaf, probably the two other battalions we haven't spoken about.
Yeah.
You're the expert.
Yeah, Liam's fully went, nah, this is not mine. Drop the mic. He's like, Chris is the guy.
Chris has done well with both of them. He's won a GT with Dreadwood, and he's won 2 GTs now with Dreadwood, I think.
No.
You've won 2? You've won 1 GT?
I've gone 5-0 at 2 GTs with the Dreadwood, but I didn't win the second one.
Yeah, okay. And then he did super well with Masters, Australian Masters, which is the top competitive tournament in Australia with Winterleaf. So it's his topic.
So Dreadwood, I've moved on from. I don't think it's the top. I think, I think Winterleaf's the top. I keep flicking between that and Harvest Boom, but I think Winterleaf's the top, if I'm honest. But Dreadwood is all around the Spite-Revenants, so you have to take an Outcast battalion. It normally includes 3 units of Spite-Revenants, but in Dreadwood it has to include 4. So you take 4 units of Spite-Revenants, so that's 280 points, but that fulfills all of your battle line. The battalion is also really cheap. It's only 90 points, and then Dreadwood's only 90 points. So for 450 points, you've fulfilled your battle line, and you've got yourself a 1-drop, 3 command points, and 3 artifacts. So pretty good going, 450 points, and then you can pick and choose the remaining kind of 1,500 points of your army. Mine was Alariel plus Durthu, and then a unit of 20 Dryads, and then Kurnoth Hunters with bows. I would bring on, I think. So it kind of just gives you that. The main thing with Dreadwood is that at the start of the first battle round, you have to determine who's going first before you make this roll. But then at the start of the first battle round, you roll a d3, and that tells you how many stratagems you get to use from a list of 3. So the 3 stratagems are, one of them lets you redeploy any Dreadwood unit anywhere on the board, at least 6 inches away from your opponent. So Spirit of Durthu, I'm looking at you. Or Alariel, put her straight into range for Metamorphosis turn 1 if you wanted to, but generally Spirit of Durthu because he's slow, but so you can just put him anywhere 6 away. The second one is pick up to 3 Dreadwood units, and they can all immediately make a move as if it was a movement phase, but they can't run. So that's great if you've got Alariel, Drycha maybe, because Alariel moves 16. And this all happens before the start of the first turn, so you're going to be able to move again. So with Alariel, you can go 32 inches effectively on your first turn, so you can be wherever you need to be with her.
Nago looks so unimpressed right now.
I'm just thinking about being across from you, Chris, at the table, and it's one of these hero-based scenarios. Duality of death, 3 places of power, arcane power. We're playing these games, and all of a sudden, Alariel moves 32 inches in a combination, and that's scary as hell. Especially if you're thinking about playing with some movement shenanigans and teleporting around in the bases. As an opponent, scares the shit out of me. As a player, just gives you so much flex.
Yeah.
And then the third stratagem is you can limit the range of all spells and abilities and missile weapons against Dreadwood units in the first battle round to 12 inches. So if you're playing a gun line, you just go, you put your army, you know how far they can move, the range of their weapons is going to be capped at 12, so you just add their move, add 12, sit 0.1 of an inch past that line, and you're golden. They can't do anything to you on that first turn. So to be honest, if we were playing 3 places of power, I wouldn't be using the move because Alariel's fast enough to hit that middle spot from my deployment zone anyway. I'd just be limiting the range of any of your abilities and stuff against me. And I'd just be pushing up, sitting on the objectives on my side, limiting your range and just going, cool, well, there's not a lot you can do to me turn 1. But the main thing with Dreadwood is that ability to choose. And if you roll all 3 stratagems, then yeah, you're laughing. It's great. But generally, I always played for just 1 because you're always getting 1. So it was trying to build the list where if you got 2, that was kind of the sweet spot. Because I generally aim to redeploy Durthu 6 away and then use the move to move Dryads up the board and Alariel up the board. So the Dryads have moved 14 inches on your first turn. They can go really fast, and then Alariel's moved right across. So then Durthu and Alariel can just go and alpha strike anything they want to. Generally, I think most people were playing the Dreadwood with Drycha in there so that they would take her Squirmlings, move her or position her away, nuke off any kind of big screening unit, and then maybe hit with Durthu as well. But the Dreadwood can just be screened out and then it generally dies because you're doing all of that combat punch most of the time with probably heroes. Some people, I think, were taking 6, maybe even 9 Kurnoth Hunters with scythes and setting them up 6 away and using them as your alpha punch. But to be honest, I still think it kind of gets pulled apart. The way I played it was a defensive Dreadwood where I had my Kurnoth Hunters with bows and I would just use the flexibility of the stratagems depending on what I would roll. That if I got them all, then great, I could maybe go for an alpha strike with Durthu, plus I can move Alariel, I can get into position. But if I'm playing an army that's a gun line or a Zinch magic heavy army that I don't want to go anywhere near, I'm just going to limit its range, move and shoot it, that sort of thing. So the flexibility that it provides is massive if you can just flex for whatever you're playing. But you have to have taken units that allow you to flex. And that's what I think Alariel lets you do, basically, because she can just lend a hand whichever way you want to do it. But I think the combat Dreadwood is kind of a 4 out of 5 wins fairly easily. But then I think it would generally struggle with that 5th game, which is why you weren't seeing many people winning with them. Whereas I took the more defensive approach, and the 2 times I ran it at a competitive tournament, I went 5-0 with it. So I think that's the way to play it. But it's not Dryad heavy, and as we talked about at the start, I think the Dryads are the top competitive part of Sylvaneth, and that's where I would lead to the Winterleaf.
Yeah, and the reason we're leaning towards Winterleaf, and this is definitely, if I think about again as someone who's watching Sylvaneth as an opponent, AOS 1 we really saw that combination of Household and Gnarlroot. AOS 2 kind of came in and we started seeing things like Dreadwood. Now it's kind of shifted and you are seeing people like Laurie, and there are some competitive people like yourself who are finding a lot of success with Winterleaf. Why Winterleaf? What do we like about it?
Before we move on, we forgot to mention Gnarlroot lets you have 1 Order Wizard.
Yes, the ally piece.
Yeah, we just forgot to mention that. So yeah, Winterleaf, let's go.
So Winterleaf, well, we can mention it here because Winterleaf will say straight at the top, lets you take 1 any order unit. So anything you want from order, you can have.
So if I want like an aspect of the storm or the sea,
done.
I can have it.
Done.
If you want Marathi,
I want Marathi in my list.
So
go on, Chris.
Winterleaf is the Oprah of Sylvaneth. It's you get an aspect, you get whatever you want. You just hand
you get
it
a
out.
Frost Phoenix.
Yeah, you get an order unit. You get an order unit. You get an order unit.
Wow.
So, yeah. Anything you want, doesn't need to be a wizard. It can just be anything. And the amazing thing from that as well, which I'm not sure if they want it to be, but as written it currently is, Compendium is included in that because all the Compendium stuff still has order. So you can take any Compendium units in that as well. So yeah, you've got a massive range. Anything you want. The most common thing I think you saw, Rob Symes was one of the proponents of, I think, was the Hurricanum. You could put that in Gnarlroot because it's a wizard, but also you can put it in a Winterleaf, and arguably it's better in a Winterleaf because of the main ability that Winterleaf gives you, which is any hit roll of a 6 or more for any Winterleaf Dryad generates an extra attack. So the reason I'd say, the Hurricanum could work for that is because it has a bubble of +1 to hit. So then they're doing it on 5s. But then when you factor in the fact that Dryads on their War Scroll have an ability in your turn, you can pick an enemy unit within 3 to enrapture, and you get +1 to hit. So even without taking a Hurricanum, Dryads are hitting on 3s, and any 5s and 6s are generating extra attacks. And when they have 2 attacks each, and they have a 2-inch reach, even just a unit of 10 makes 21 attacks. So then when it's hitting on 3s and generating extras on 5s and 6s, you're getting 14 hits and 7 extra attacks. And then if you combine that through a turn where Alariel's used her once per game command ability to reroll wounds, you then, all of those, you're winning on 4s rerolling. So then 75% of your wound rolls are successful. And a unit of 30 Dryads, doing the math in a Winterleaf when we add the next ability, which is all Winterleaf units. This is not just your Dryads, so this is any Sylvaneth unit that you put into this army. It's only the Sylvaneth units.
So not the Hurricane if we put that in?
Not that, but any of the Sylvaneth units you take get to reroll hits and wounds of 1 against Chaos. And that's shooting and combat. So suddenly your Spirit Durthu, Liam can talk all about this with a Gaia Strike, for example.
So good.
Is now 2s and 2s rerolling 1s.
And if we think about, the quote unquote meta, there is definitely a high propensity of chaos. There will be even more with Slaanesh coming very quickly. So you've got a really good chance to be re-rolling 1s. If you go into a 5-game tournament, you can probably expect maybe at least 2 of those games against chaos.
Yeah, exactly. Like at the moment, I've been practicing with Winterleaf, playing around with an aspect of the Storm build. And the reason, and as Chris just mentioned, only the Sylvaneth get reroll hit rolls of 1. And the thing that I've picked for the aspect of the Storm, for example, like this is like one of the order units that I picked, was to replace my Kurnoth Hunters because it's an epic model and I really wanted to paint one. But he also has an internal buff where like, and this is what I was talking about earlier, where like things with internal buffs are amazing. So for him, as Magro has experienced, like models like the Aspect of Storm and Frostlock Phoenix, they have an internal buff. So Aspect of Storm on the charge, he heals, and also he gets to reroll hit rolls of 1 with his big spear. He's just a combat beast. Like that's what he does. But like when you're looking at order units for a Winterleaf list, I would pick things that could either help your army, like debuff your enemy, such as the Frostlock Phoenix, which we see heaps of, a Hurricanum. Help me out here, Chris.
I mean, the most common one I think that you see is made famous, I guess, now by Laurie Huggett-Wild over in the UK, and he's written his rundown on the Honest Wargamer as well, is the Winterleaf and Frostheart Phoenix, because it's an order unit that going into a magic-heavy army, it's going to get its armor saves up really high, and it's going to just be able to be really fast. It plays really well with Alariel, as I mentioned before. I like it. I still think it's really strong, but the one thing to say is any of these units that aren't Sylvaneth that get put into a Sylvaneth army, either as normal allies or as part of an order unit or an order wizard or a Dryad unit through the house, through the special battalion abilities, they still count as allies. So therefore they can't take items. They can't take magical artifacts. And for me, that really hurts the Phoenix. I don't think it matters quite as much now because particularly there was one item, the Jade Diadem, which was just incredible on a Phoenix. But now they've changed that so it only works on an unmodified 6 rather than a modified, which is why it was so incredible. But the fact that you don't get the artifact on that unit, for me, has actually meant that, to be honest, I never take an order unit in all the lists I've written. All the buffs and the reroll hits and wounds of 1 against Chaos only being able to be used by the Sylvaneth units. I'm just going, okay, I just want Sylvaneth units because this buff is so strong. All I want is that buff, and I love all of the Sylvaneth units anyway, so I'm just going to take pure Sylvaneth.
So quickly, Chris, so do you reckon that right now, if I was looking at my CanCon list at the moment, you would say that take out the Eidolon, right, and put Kurnoth Hunters with Scythes instead is a lot stronger than the one with the Eidolon?
If I'm honest, I'd probably just take a second Durthu, and I'd take 2 Durthus.
Oh my god, I'm not building another Snake Durthu. I'm not doing that to myself.
So check out Liam's Twitter on Shadowhammer if you want to see some amazing conversions. But I do want to give special props to a unit that Liam used to run a long time ago, and I haven't seen for a while, which is the Lawmaster, which I think is an incredible model still. Liam, why are you laughing?
I just remember our game where you, the game where I showed you the Lawmaster.
So basically, Liam and I were playing. He had a Lawmaster. Lawmaster has an incredible spell. I think it goes off on a 6 that allows one unit, one model.
Casting value of 5.
Casting value of 5. Casting value of 5. So, and you pick one model, so not a unit, a model, and that model can re-roll all of its hits and wound rolls for that one model. So he was doing it on Durthu with me. So the chances of doing those 6 damage just spikes tremendously. I asked him, actually, what was the conversation, Liam? It was
the conversation was pretty easy. He goes, "That wizard's really amazing. How, is it just any order unit?" I'm like, "Yes." And he goes, "Wait, so if I put that in my army, can I put it on my Carmine Dragon?" And I went, "Yeah." And he goes, "Great." And I saw you 2-3 days after in the city.
Day after. Ran into Games Workshop. Best $23 I think I spent. The Lawmaster is incredible. It's like 100. I think it's 140 points now. It went up slightly.
It's gone up. Yeah.
Oh, it's gone up finally. Stop
140 points. If you're thinking about combat potential, you got a Durthu. Turning from a Durthu to a Durthu.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's incredible. Because you used to cast on him, then he'd go through the Wildwoods and then just cut sick.
Also, it also includes missile weapons on Durthu, so it's not just his damage 6. So his shooting attack also made him just an absolute beast. He was just insane.
He becomes very reliable. More importantly, Alariel becomes very reliable. I would be putting it in for Alariel. I'm moving away from taking both Alariel and Durthu in the same list, I think, because I just want lots of Dryads as well. And
that's like 900 points, right? At the moment, that's about
1,000.
Wow.
So I'm always taking Alariel at the moment. I'm spending some of the spare points from dropping Durthu onto Endless Spells, which we'll come on to. And I'm going to be changing up to just saving those points, investing them into upping my 10s of Dryads into 30s, so I have more than 130, and then having Endless Spells, so putting in Branch Witch Bombs back into my lists, and also taking the Lawmaster I think is a really good choice for Winterleaf, because for the times when you're not playing Chaos, you've got those rerolls on Alariel, which is just going to be massive, because she I think does more damage than Durthu, because she's flat damage 5. And then she goes to 4 from 3, so she scales better. She has 5 attacks all the time as well. She has a natural +1 to hit against big hordes. And then her hand as well. Her hand attack can potentially kill anything in the game on a 6/6. If you get a wound through, it just kills anything. And it's amazing at just killing 5-6 wound heroes, because you roll 2 dice at the end of the combat phase against anything that's wounded by it. And if you roll over its wounds characteristic or 2 6s, the model just dies. So if you come into a few 5 wound heroes, you go into a big unit and you go into Witch Elves and there's a Hag Queen nearby, for example. You can put all of her beetle attacks into the Witch Elves. You can put her hand attacks into the Hag Queen. You get one of those hand attacks through. All you have to do at the end of the combat phase is roll a 6+ on 2d6, and the Hag dies as well. So she's brilliant when you factor in the fact she's got 3 spells. She heals everything, including herself. And then her Metamorphosis spell is amazing, given that it does mortal wounds at range on a 4-up. So I just think she's really, really good. And a Lawmaster just makes her incredible.
Yeah, and I think if I think about the formations as well, and we've talked about it a few times, and I really want to drive the point home, is that a lot of your formations require an additional formation. So we've talked about Gnarlroot and Household. We've talked about, I think you guys know your formations better than I do.
Yep.
But that's essentially giving me 2 additional command points if I'm doing that. I find that your formations are relatively well priced. They're not too expensive. And you're getting additional artifacts as well. So you're probably walking away with 3 artifacts, 2 command points, and obviously you kick your game off and you're now at 3. All these additional benefits. You can definitely start to see how a Sylvaneth list is an optimized list is going to be built.
I have seen some people try and do non-battalion Sylvaneth armies, and I just haven't had much success with it.
You might as well run mixed order if you're going to do that. But
Yeah.
I think this goes well with what Chris said, was that, you know, with your Eidolon, like, what's the gap? Like, if you're going to be trading off Kurnoth Hunters for an allied unit, and you're going to lose all of those allegiance benefits, well, not allegiance benefits, but that particular unit's not going to benefit from all of the good Sylvaneth stuff. It really needs to be strong and really make sure that you're not wasting your points, or it's not inherently already in your army somewhere. But again, we're talking competitively here. If you want to run a Marathi and you love Marathi, obviously do what you want to do. That's your thing. Do it.
So, like, for example, the Eidolon for me, for example, like, I just looked at the rules, and the fact that I saw that he didn't have a monster keyword, so he could get Lookout Sir, so you can get a -1 to hit. So when you have the Dryads and everything around him, -1 to hit is super strong. He's 12 wounds, so -1 to hit, 12 wound hero now is amazing. And since your army has built-in terrain, you have like terrain everywhere, and you can just literally put him on a piece of terrain, have him a 2-up save, -1 to hit. He's good to go. Like, he flies, which is annoying because that means he can get targeted. But you're just being like, hey, cool. Like, that's the main reason why I kind of had him, because like I don't have any other way of getting a hero 2-up save and making him super durable. And for CanCon, and this is like why I put him in for CanCon, because there's a lot of hero-based scenarios in CanCon. So I was like, cool, this is a perfect way of me just making sure I get 2 out of my 6 games, an easy win. That's it.
Yeah. So obviously I'm not shaming you, and you know, it's not a bad choice. And I think that's one of the great things about Sylvaneth and Order, is that we have such a wide variety of units. But think about, if you are going to take that unit, what are you really trying to get? And, you know, I love the idea of having something that's independent, a Marathi, an Eidolon, something that I don't have to worry about the synergies of my army. I can literally just, like a bullet, just shoot it at you.
Well, Marathi is a good example, because she's a level 3 spellcaster in small form. So she can just get the Wildwoods off just like how Alariel does. So you just go, cool, I'm just going to cast spells with Marathi, and each of those Wildwoods going to go off. So she's just, Sylvaneth are like, oh, Marathi, just do your thing, cast spells. And she's just like, yeah, okay, no problem. And just goes bang, 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 bang. And then when she's pissed off and she's in monster form, you go, okay, cool, Durthu, you hold back, I'll fly in. So, like, Marathi's actually a really good shout, in my opinion. So, yeah.
So it's like your sport for choices.
Yes.
Well, yeah, I mean, when you can take any order unit, and that's like 300 or something war scrolls, then yeah, you kind of are sport for choice, which is great. And that's another reason why I think you just see more and more Winterleaf. I'll be honest, there's a unit that it's probably the only unit of multiple models that I've, other than Sisters of the Thorn, actually, because that's a common one. But I'm just gonna say it. I'm gonna put Chameleon Skinks into my Winterleaf.
No, not Chameleon Skinks.
We talked earlier about Tree Revenants being useful for getting the objectives where you couldn't get a Wildwood, but how they were limited to 6 inches of a board edge and needing to charge. Well, Chameleon Skinks every turn can just go wherever you want them, and if they get put into cover, they have a 3-up save, and yeah, they're really, really, really good, and I don't know why people haven't been doing it. But yeah, my next Winterleaf list has a unit of 10 Chameleon Skinks, and they're just going to sit and wait, and then when they need to outnumber, because they can be placed anywhere on the board, they can be set up within 3 if you want them to, anywhere you look, and because most objectives now are controlled with a 6-inch zone of control, it's almost impossible to zone out 9 inches away from stopping teleports while also zoning out 3 away from weak Chameleon Skinks. So you talk knife to the heart, it's going to be so hard for someone to just stop me taking those 10 Skinks and working out, oh, I just need 10 models, and just going bang, there you go.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm going down the route of for the next competitive kind of build, is taking out Durthu, replacing him with Endless Spells, a Branch Witch Bomb, and Chameleon Skinks.
That sounds disgusting.
So awesome. Sounds like there is lots and lots and lots of cool things you can do. And I think I love the idea that I can just test and play and try and build some really cool models.
And the other thing as well is, and you guys have all seen this, like the cool thing with Sylvaneth when it comes to a hobby aspect is with these allies or these options, you can just make a cool themed Sylvaneth army however you want. Like I remember when I was like talking to Chris about it, and I said, "Oh, I saw like I really like the blood system models. I would really like to make them branch rays." And his response was, "You need to make Durthu into a snake if you're going to do that." And I was like, "Yeah, okay. I'll just get a spare Marathi kit that I have and just kit bash it together."
As you do. Everyone has a spare Marathi kit sitting at home.
Pretty much. Anyways, but like you just got that cool aspect of hobby where like if you want to get a cool theme going, Sylvaneth is definitely the one where it's like, cool, I want to do this and that. And since you have those order options, like any order option, you can actually convert that order unit. Like some people have just like cool, like I know Chris has some cool ideas on how to make a Luminarch a Sylvaneth model. Like there's just cool things.
I choose Tree Lords to like, I'm going to build a Luminarch where one of the Tree Lords is holding the actual Luminarch gun. Like he's ripped it from a Luminarch in the woods and you just firing the laser like a giant gun. And stuff like that. And I've seen people putting the Hurricanum swirls again, just kind of around a Tree Lord to using the Sylvaneth model and combining it with a kit to do those cool model opportunities. I myself, for the Chameleon Skinks, have thought about taking parts of the Chameleon Skinks and then Dryads and like having part of a Dryad body and then one Skink arm and then maybe a head and a part of a tail to kind of show that they're like
Chameleons.
Perfect mimicry rule that they're kind of blending in, but you can still tell that it's a different unit. So yeah, there's definitely lots of options that you can do there. You can make your whole army around that one order unit that you ally in.
Yeah, which is cool. So that's why I think with this book and this army, with all those battalion options, your hobby goes to next level. Like
it's not one of those armies that you pick, you play with for 6 months and you move on. This will keep you playing as long as you want to. I think that's what I like about Sylvaneth.
Chris and I are perfect examples. We each have about 4+ different armies. We're addicts is the best way to describe it. We go off. I know Chris went off and played Khorne for a bit, and he came back to Sylvaneth.
It's true. Yeah. I keep coming back to Sylvaneth.
Yeah.
Every time an edition changes, it opens up one of the other battalions or something happens, and they're in the best spot they've ever been now. Like I said at the start of this show, there's 5 of the big battalions that I think are all viable. And I was trying to move on and say, look, I've done my year of order. I'm going to do a year of chaos. But I just keep coming back to Sylvaneth. I love them. They're so flexible. There's so many ways to play them. I think they're really strong. And they're just fun. They play in every phase, I think is the thing for me, is they have a really strong hero phase. They have a really, really important strong movement phase. They can have a good shooting phase. They can fight really well. Like they can manipulate battle shock with Spite-Revenants. They literally can play in every single phase, and I love it.
Yeah. And like for me, just doing Flesh-Eater Courts, went back to Sylvaneth, went to Doors of Cain, went back to Sylvaneth, and now I'm doing Slaanesh, and now I know that after Slaanesh, I'll be like, cool, I still got a Sylvaneth army, but I want to play around and do some cool stuff with, because again, Winterleaf and Nara and stuff, you have so many options where you go, cool, I can do whatever I want. So with these battalions that we've now all mentioned, it's an army where once you invest in it, you're not going to store it or throw it out.
Yeah, very true. So let's talk customizing this force. So I think we've done a really good job digging into the dirt of the unit choices. We've got a really good grasp of formations. Now it comes to the little intricacies about command traits and artifacts and spell laws that you guys are tapping into. So let's start with allegiance ability command traits. Is there one that you guys go for, or one that's stronger than others?
Warsinger
is generally where I lead now. Yeah.
Warsinger.
So Warsinger is +1 to the charge rolls for
within 10
Sylvaneth?
inches. Yeah.
Within 10. Yeah.
Within 10. So it's not wholly within, it's within 10. So you can conga line those Dryads and go for gold.
Great.
Yeah, Sylvaneth is one of those older, because it's an older army and it's something that they haven't changed other than the True Lord Ancient, which is the weird thing in the FAQs. There's no holy within this army. The only thing really is that when you first deploy units that you into the trees that you deployed off the table, is every model has to be placed within 3 of a Wildwood. But even then, it's within 3. It's not wholly within 3.
Within 3.
You can put the back of a base there, but that's the only thing. Anything else just lets you tail out. As long as you're always within 3 for the unit, you can tail out. So the traits are the same. So Warsinger is 10-inch bubble. You just need one part of a Dryad. within 10, and that you could be 30 inches away with the rest of the unit really from a conga line and just make that charge at +1.
Yep. So
Awesome.
the reason why we go Warsinger is because when we teleport from Wildwoods, we're 9 away. So getting +1 charge and making that an 8 is so much better than a 9-inch charge. Like anything to get that charge going off is a bonus for us, and we'll take it.
And now with rerolls to charge, because Sylvaneth, other than outside of the Tree Lord Ancient, which I think we've both said we don't see as much, or we certainly don't rate as much anymore, they don't have an innate command ability other than Alarial, and that's only once per game. So given that you're starting turn 1 really with 3 command points after your hero phase, you've always got a bank of 2 command points, and then every single turn that's increasing by 1. So you've got them for your reroll charges or immunity to battle shock, that sort of thing. So anything that boosts that charge, given that when you do need to make the charge, and usually it's just with Dryads to get onto objectives to put bodies there. The bonuses, the +1 doesn't sound like a lot, but then when you start combining it with Harvest Boon and then cogs is the main thing. Yeah, like even outside of Harvest Boon, getting +3, so you need 6-inch rerollable charges from teleports from across the board. It's just really, really strong.
Yep, so that's why we rate it. The one trait that most people take in Edition 1, I think we should mention, is Gnarled Warrior, ignoring Rend 1, which was really strong, because a lot of the times in the game there was not a lot of Rend 2. And when you had a combination of an artifact such as Oaken Armor, and let's just say that's a classic thing, the Tree Lord Ancient, right? Classic Tree Lord Ancient in Edition 1. He was always the general. So you had Gnarled Warrior, Oaken Armor, and his command ability of rerolling saves of 1. So it's a 2-up rerolling 1 save, and I'm ignoring Rend 1. There was just so many times where people were like...
And he'd be in a Null Root household. So once he was in combat, you couldn't retreat from him. So, that was basically the AOS 1 Sylvaneth General, was a Tree Lord Ancient with Oaken Armor and Gnarled Warrior holding an army down and just saying, you can't...
Stuff you.
Yeah. And I've been against that, and it's also frustrating because I don't want to be in combat with this 2-up rerollable thing, but the movement shenanigans that are within Sylvaneth, often I don't have a choice. And if I do get myself out of that position, you can just move somewhere else and tie something else up. So it's like a damned if I do, damned if I don't. But again, it goes back to the flex.
I actually like that has gone away, because as you say, it's quite frustrating to play. So it could lead to a bit of a negative play experience. And a lot of people I know didn't like playing Sylvaneth at the start because that would happen. And you just get all these situations where you'd lose a game to basically an unkillable Tree Lord Ancient that you couldn't retreat from. And so that dropping out of the game, to be honest, in favor of another command ability, which favors movement and constantly changing the flow and where models are positioned on the battlefield, for me feels more fun for both myself and my opponent. So I like Warsinger for that point.
So it sounds like we have a clear winner. Warsinger is look, there are other ones. I think there are some that I like Gifts of Gyran, which allows you to heal. It can be very useful, but it sounds like Warsinger is definitely the leader when it comes to traits.
Gift of Gyran is the one I thought I would move on to, and I actually tried it in my master's list because I had thought combining it with Alarial, having Gift of Gyran on my Durthu with Doppelganger Cloak combined with Alarial's heal would mean that both Alarial and my Durthu would both heal 2d3 wounds, and the Durthu always being able to strike before my opponent could hit him, knowing that he's always basically going to be damage d6 because he's only damage d3 when he's got 2 wounds left. So if I was always going to heal at least 2, being 1 and 1 on 2d3s, there was physically no way he could never not be at least d6 damage. It was okay for that, but to be honest, with the Doppelganger Cloak, he wasn't getting wounded. He was either getting killed in 1 outside of combat, or he wasn't getting wounded anyway when he was in combat because he was just killing everything. And the Gift of Gyran, every time I did heal with it, it did only heal me 1. And I kind of just wish I'd had the flexibility of making a charge more likely or something like that. So
I think another cool trait, which I haven't really looked at properly, is Lord of Spites on a Durthu, maybe. You can reroll the first failed hit made for your general in each case. That's cool. But besides that, like, there's nothing really else that, like, Wisdom of Ancients, like, with command points and stuff, don't need it. Just if you need to make sure they don't fail Battle Shock, just use command point. Realm Rorke is cool. Which is add 2 to result when you navigate through the realm roots. If you don't want him If you really want him to get that 6 to move again, it's great. But generally,
I think you just get around that by making the charges anyway.
Yeah, that's why like Warsinger just takes out all that, and all the command points and stuff just takes out most of the other traits. So I think it's Warsinger and Gnarled Warrior is what you would probably look at.
What do we think about artifacts? So it sounds like we've got a clear winner. How are we arming up our army? So maybe we'll start off and ask about the inherent artifacts within Sylvaneth.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to probably pick on you guys too much and dig deep in Malign Sorcery because there's a lot of choices. But are there things that sit within Sylvaneth that are like a go-to for you?
Randy's my material.
Acorn of the Ages, always.
Yeah.
Should be the first artifact you take in.
What is it? What is it?
It's the one that it's the one that lets you set up a wood once per game for free in your hero phase. No dice roll required.
Your opponent can't stop it.
Yeah, it automatically happens, but it's limited to the Wildwood has to be set up within 5. But again, it's not wholly within, so you can set up part of one base and then do a line of 2 bases from that.
Yeah.
So that still covers quite a lot of distance. So you pretty much always know when you're setting up where you want to put that wood down. You just put generally the Branch Wraith or Branch Witch that's taking it where you know you want that wood, and you know there's nothing your opponent can do to stop it if you're going first. So yeah, the Acorn, because the woods are so vital to how Sylvaneth work, that it has to be the first artifact you ever take.
Yeah. And I said minus my material.
Yeah.
Yep, so let's add 1 casting rolls made for the bearer, but if they attempt to cast a Sylvaneth spell, it's +2.
So how are you using that?
Getting the woods off. So you give that to a Branch Wraith or a Branch Witch that has Verdant Blessing. So now you just need a 4 or more. With Arcane Terrain and even Harvest Boon, it's pretty much like a 2, like you can't fail. So it's really good. And with Verdant Blessing, which we can talk on earlier, it's 18-inch range, did we say, Chris? Yeah. 18-inch range. And it doesn't have to be wholly within, so you can literally make sure you can leave your opponent, like with dispel range of 30 inches now, I've been making sure that I'm out of 30 so my opponent can't dispel it. So being out of 30 and then being able to just successfully cast it straight away. So like, I'll be like, cool. So it's kind of like me saying this is my second Acorn of Ages, but might fail, but generally it doesn't. So it's like, cool, here's another Acorn of Ages for you. Boom, another Wildwood.
So this is really reinforcing why we're spending so many points on a formation to get that first turn, being able to dictate and drop our woods, drop additional woods, summon more woods. That's why we're doing this, and failure to doing this definitely puts you on the back foot.
It's a two in one, because not only are the battalions making you 1 drop so that you get to go first to put your woods down, they also then give you the 2 artifacts that get you the woods. So you're doubling up. You do it because it gets you 2 artifacts that basically guarantee you 2 more woods, and then it gives you the first turn to put those 2 woods on the table. Whereas if you don't take them, you're not getting those 2 artifacts, and you're not getting first turn necessarily. So you're either going to go from having 1 Wildwood on the table that you guaranteed because of your army to 3 Wildwoods, and that's the difference.
Straight away. Yeah.
Do you want 1 Wildwood on the table, or do you want 3? And the answer should always be 3.
Yeah.
Do we still like the Oaken Armor? I know that was a very AOS 1 artifact. Is it still valuable now?
I think to be fair, since the change to Mystic Shield from AOS 2, it potentially, I would look at it more than I would have looked at it in AOS 1, actually. I never, ever took it in AOS 1 because all of the things I was ever worried about in AOS 1 were doing mortal wounds on a hit roll of a 6. So mortal wounds don't care about you having +1 to your armor save anyway. So I would always take the Briar Sheath, which was a -1 to hit. And the Briar Sheath,
that's all hit rolls.
The -1 to hit for me was what made your Tree Lord Ancient, for example, stay alive, because anything that did mortal wounds on a hit roll of 6 now longer can't do mortal wounds, so it can't hurt me anyway. Whereas if I'd increased my armor save, it wouldn't have been hurting me through my armor save anyway. It would have been doing mortal wounds to me. So I personally don't see the Oaken Armor as having a place, especially when you consider the realm artifacts that you have available to choose from now.
Which is a beautiful transition. So what are the realm artifacts you may consider? I mean, I know you talk about Doppelganger Cloak, which has, as at this particular point, has now been changed, so it's not as effective as it used to be. But what other artifacts, or what types of artifacts do you look for from Malign Sorcery?
Okay, so I'm currently doing Gear Strike with Durthu, +1 to hit, +1 to wound, just making a bit more of a combat beast. I do know there's some other cool artifacts out there for Durthu. I would say Ethereal Amulet, giving him a 3-up, ignoring all rend, say, like armor. So pretty much anyone who can do rend 2 or whatever, you go nut, and then maybe cast Mystic Shield on him. So it's a 3-up rerolling ones. So you pretty much made him like a Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragon, just walking around going like, I'm going to stuff you up. That's another cool add-on. I think what's the other realm artifacts, Chris, that ignore wounds? Is it the one from the Realm of Fire?
So yeah, the one from Akshi, I've forgotten what it's called now, but it gives you a 4-up.
Something scales.
Yeah,
Ignax Scales.
Yeah, it gives you a 4-up. It gives you a 4-up mortal wound save, which, given that the army otherwise has no access to mortal wound saves, can be really,
amazing.
Really good. It's just, if you could put it on Alariel, then that would be the item I would take all the time, but obviously you can't. So it's okay on a Durthu, but you need to be able to heal. And generally, you're just buffing his killing ability. I still think the Doppelganger is useful for that turn when, if you are taking an Alariel and a Durthu build and you go in with Alariel first, that turn where you just go, you still can't hit me with Durthu, that one turn is still probably enough. But I think now that change has been made, if I was going to take a realm artifact, I probably would lead into what Liam is taking and take the Gaia Strike and just make Durthu 2s and 2s.
Yeah, really increasing that reliability of Durthu. We know how much he kills.
And if he's out of Winterleaf and he's not going against Chaos, if there's damp terrain, take D3 Mortal Wounds, heal him with Regrowth from the Spell Lore. Now he's 2s, rerolling 1s, winning on 2s. Now he's just like, cool, screw you.
Yeah.
But yeah, the other artifact that, to be honest, since that change and since me taking Durthu out of my list in favor of a Branch Witch Bomb, means I'm actually going to all 3 artifacts being Sylvaneth artifacts. So the one other that I always used to take, and this is what you take if you do the Branch Witch Bomb, so I'll explain that now, is an item called the Silverwood Circlet. And basically what it does is it adds 6 inches to the range of all spells that the bearer knows. So the reason you take that on a Branch Witch is because the Branch Witch signature spell on their War Scroll is called Unleash Spites. It's cast on a 5, so it's quite a low value. It's only got a 9-inch range, but it affects all enemy units within 9 inches. So if you take the Silverwood Circlet, you're adding 6. So it's now
15.
Oh, it's now 15. You can put that Branch Witch on a Balewind, which adds 6. So it's then 21. The great thing with how the Balewind works now as well, though, is you set up the Balewind model within an inch of the model that summons it. The Balewind base is about 5 inches across. So if you set it up an inch in front of your Branch Witch, you then put the Balewind in front of that, and then, yes, the Branch Witch goes on top, but you measure from any point of the Balewind. So the front of that Balewind has now moved 6 inches forward from where your Branch Witch was. So you've effectively got another 6 plus 6 plus 6. So you've got plus 18 onto your 9. So you're now hitting everything within 27. And then you can actually, with the realm spells well.
Just quickly, Anthony just did not look impressed.
Then the other thing is, you go, Balewind is a Malign Sorcery spell. You've also got the portals. So if you set up that Balewind within 1 inch of a portal, you can then extend the range by effectively another 19 inches through the portal. So you can put that portal 19 inches away and then hit everything within 27 of that portal. And basically you hit your opponent's entire army. And then if you've put Throne of Vines spell on that Branch Witch to give it plus D3 to casting values, if that Balewind is set up within 1 of Arcane, you've got D3 plus 1 extra to cast. You can set up the Chronomantic Cogs with a different wizard and rewind time. So in the same turn, that Branch Witch can cast Throne of Vines and then cast Unleash Spites.
Also, if it's in a Naro list, it's also casting another spell.
But the Chronomantic Cogs now lets you be able to do the Branch Witch Bomb on the same turn that you set up the Balewind outside of Null Root. Previously, the only way to do it in one turn was taking Null Root, whereas now, because of Cogs, if you cast Cogs with a different wizard and then rewind time with the Branch Witch, it lets you cast your Throne of Vines to get the additional spell up to cast your Balewind, rewind the time, and you can basically hit your opponent's army with potentially +4 to cast if you do it right. And if you roll that 12, you're rolling 16 dice for every single enemy unit within a 27-inch radius that you're starting 19 inches away, and it's going to be doing mortal wounds on 6s to every single unit, and it's an 80-point character. And if you haven't set it up, Alariel could be next to that portal, and then she can cast Metamorphosis through the portal. So then suddenly you're doing Metamorphosis at 35-inch threat range that's doing casting value. She could Throne of Vines instead, 4-ups do mortal wounds. So there's a lot that the Malign Sorcery has now added.
Yeah.
So I want to stop for a second. If you're watching this video on playback, 2 things. 1, Chris, drop the mic. You've just, wow. Wow. 2, and more importantly, I want you to rewind this video, go back 2 to 3 minutes, get your little notepad out. I want you to write everything Chris just said, because that is the thinking of a top tier Age of Sigmar player. So that tactic is crazy. And remind me never to play you with Sylvaneth.
No, you don't want to play with the Branch Witch Bomb. Okay, you want
I don't want to play
Sylvaneth.
him generally now. No. Like, we're done. We can play with Khorne. We can play Shadespire like we used to, but no Sylvaneth there. That shit is bananas.
Oh, and I forgot to mention, if that Balewind's behind a Wildwood, there's no line of sight, so you can't shoot it off.
No.
It's amazing.
Wow.
So, that's the route I'm going down, is dropping the Durthu to just give me more magical support, and using the woods more, setting it off, doing AoE mortals rather than sending in a Durthu. Just because I've done the Durthu thing and I want to try a different route, and that's what we've been talking about this whole show, is how flexible they are. And to be honest, that's what kind of does it for me right now, is I want to go down that magical route and have the chameleon skinks just popping in where I need them for getting the gold.
Amazing. Let's continue the thought pattern around endless spells. We talked about Cogs getting that additional spell or increasing the movement by 2. We've talked a little bit about Balewind and being able to extend the range of spells. Is there anything else from the endless spells that's worth thinking about for a Sylvaneth list?
Pendulum.
Why?
You're telling your opponent where to go, because it never's going to go back to you. So for me, since with Wildwoods and stuff, we're controlling the board quite well, like just telling where we're going to go and stuff. But you want your opponent to pretty much deny them where you want them to go. So if you put that pendulum out, you're pretty much going like, cool, don't get near it, because you're going to do D6 mortal wounds. But like, you're pretty much like, let's just say there's some Wildwoods there, and you put the pendulum just alongside there. You're pretty much telling them to go around if they want to avoid the Wildwoods, doing mortal wounds or deadly test. So just pretty much having that pendulum there, just doing like, yep, cool, I'm just going to tell you where to go, because it's never going to hit you, right? Because it's just never going to go back, it's going to go forward. And you're telling them to move around, and then you can just literally follow behind it and just be like, cool, I'm just going to go, and good luck coming to me because I've got a pendulum now. It's also a huge, massive screw you to Marathi, which is currently at the moment we're seeing a lot of Daughters of Cain and stuff. So that's really helpful. But I'm pretty much using it now as like a board control thing, being like, I have it here. And also you can easily just dispel it and just cast it again.
It's just another way to dictate the board. Like the Wildwoods already dictate the board quite significantly. And it's almost like Australians will appreciate this. People who are not Australian may not get this reference. But it's almost like a cattle dog or a sheepdog, where you're really trying to herd them. So not only are you kind of stopping them from moving around things with the Wildwoods, but now with that pendulum, you're kind of trying to bring them in this way or this way, and you're restricting them. And it's very unlikely that the opponent will have the movement capabilities to really handle that additional movement, or that pendulum kind of like avoid it, or they're going to take damage. So it's
no matter what, they're taking damage.
Yeah,
and it's so cheap. It's such a cheap spell.
Yeah, for D6 mortal wounds, the Pendulum, I think, is great. As Liam said, the reason Marathi is scared of it is because obviously her ability to only take 3 wounds in a turn doesn't work in between turns, which is when endless spells get moved. So she can potentially take copper full 6 in the face in between turns from that Pendulum. For me, the Pendulum it's certainly a deterrent in saying, I'm going to put this here, so don't come that way. But if you really don't want somebody to physically be able to come through a certain gap, the other spell I would put in is the Palisade, because it's a smaller model than a Wildwood that is not restricted in terms of being placed 1 inch away like Wildwoods. It has a low casting value. It completely blocks line of sight. There's no unless it flies, so you can use it potentially to fully block line of sight against an Alarial or something like that. Fit it in a gap. It's not terrain, so models actually can't climb over it. So models on foot have to go around endless spells. You don't get to climb over them. You fully have to go around them. It's quite long. I think it's a good six or so inches long. If you just plonk that in the way, you can literally, even if a unit was only 8-9 inches away from you, you might actually make it so they just cannot get to you. And then if they come near it on a 5-up, they're -1 to hit. You start combining that with the -1s to hit against your Dryads, and people just have a really hard time.
Yeah. Some people might be thinking to add in Geminids and stuff into the list. I currently, at the moment, would say not to add them into it, because if your opponent, because let's just say this, sometimes you always want to take the turn because you want to heal up. So your opponent's going to move it, and they're generally going to move it back towards you.
Yeah,
right.
It's a really good call out. That's for all predatory endless spells is something to consider.
Because Sylvaneth, as we talked about, like, we got regrowth spells, we got all these spells where, like, if we take damage, we want to heal up, we want to get back up to the momentum, so we will take the turn to heal up, right? Unless we feel comfortable enough where we go, cool, we can take a turn of damage, then heal up. If we don't think that, we're going to take the turn, like, straight up. So if you've got Geminids on the table and that was because of you, you're pretty much made yourself get hit. So that's why I'm saying to anyone who's thinking, I'm going to add in Geminids, I highly recommend not to.
And if I was playing you with Geminids, I would be trying to use those Geminids to take out your branch wraiths. Just because they're of your army, they're so squishy and they add so much tremendous value in those additional Dryads. So if I can just ping you once or twice with those, or hit you once and then use an arcane bolt or something to kind of kill it, that's valuable. So you want to protect your squishy heroes.
That's why I've been looking for Sylvaneth and stuff, looking at spells and stuff where they're going to not hurt me and just move forward to my opponent. That's pretty much what I'm looking at. And Pendulum is a perfect example.
That was the straight swap I did. All my lists, I think, had Geminids in before. When you could combine them and do 2d3 mortal wounds, -1 to hit, -1 attack against the same unit.
Also extending summoning range from, like, your artifacts and stuff, or like Marathi. When they said, no, you can't do that, I was like, cool, Geminids, you're out.
Geminids, I took out Geminids and I replaced it with the Pendulum. Because as Liam said, I think the effects that Geminids have, I prefer in terms of -1 to hit or -1 attack, plus mortal wounds. I like the flexibility of that, and they move quite far. But I'm always thinking about what's the negative impact of this. And as Liam said, Pendulum cannot be turned against you. You know when you set it up, if you don't put yourself in front of it, it cannot touch you. Your opponent can't turn it around on you. They can't send it back. Whereas Geminids can. And, like, if you're running a Durthu who has a low number of high quality attacks where every single one matters, and you get hit by -1 to hit or something like that, and you cop some mortal wounds in the process, you've just lost flat 6 damage on your sword, and you've potentially just had some misses that would have been hit otherwise. And when you spent the 40 points to put that in your list and your opponent turns it on you and does that, it's not the right decision in my mind.
Like, I'm sure you might heal up with Durthu. So let's say they took the D3 mortal wounds, you could heal up with regrowth, but you don't want to use that spell to cast regrowth. Like, maybe you don't want to cast regrowth at the moment.
Yeah.
And you want to summon Dryads instead.
It forces you to be taking Alarial in any list that you want to take Geminids in, because you are more covered against the mortal wound threat from them against you, because Alarial's auto heal will just heal it back. But Alarial being hit with a -1 to hit massively impacts her damage output. So you just don't want it, in my opinion.
Yeah, I like it. I think you guys have put some very interesting, and we've talked all about board control. So you know, take a damaging spell like Geminids if you see a strategy, but more of these defensive ones, even like not chromatic cogs, shackles, even shackles from a board control can be helpful. But
now
there is one. Oh, I was just gonna say there is one thing that I have wondered about with the Endless Spells and Dreadwood is potentially going all in that route and taking. You're only really sacrificing maybe a Branch Witch or something like that, and putting Throne of Vines on it to boost your casting, and then using the Dreadwood redeploy to set it up 6 away. Take the Purple Sun, and just go Throne of Vines, and then just lob a Purple Sun straight into your opponent's army on the first turn. But we'll see if that works.
Give it a shot. Give it a shot.
Another thing I was going to say was, I completely forgot it now, when it comes to Endless Spells. When you're talking about order units such as Narut and everything, one army that we all know that goes into everything is Stormcast. So another Endless Spell you can add in is the Everblaze Comet.
Yeah.
Right. So I think
if you
that's
take a Knight Incantor.
Take a Knight Incantor. Literally just be like, oi. And since you're taking turn 1, your opponent's probably going to deploy in a bubble where they're going to be like, I don't want to get hit by you, since you're going to like redeploy into your movement shenanigans. So they're going to huddle up in a bubble, and you go Knight Incantor, fire it. And that Knight Incantor literally just puts a comet in the middle of your opponent. They're taking mortal wound damage out of it. It's going to stay there. And then you just send in your lines, like send in your Durthu, send in your Dryads over, and boom, you've literally just, your opponent's just gone like, shit, I'm stuck. So that's
there's literally nothing I can do, right? Like,
there's nothing you can do
other than the most blessing of dispel rolls. I'm screwed.
Yeah. By the way, I think is it 36-inch setup, the Everblaze Comet? So they could be 36 inches away and just pop it down there, so you can't dispel it.
Yeah, so
or be 31 inches. Be like 31 inches out. Be like, cool, I'm going to throw it at you. And the thing is, you can still keep your 1-drop army, put it in an Narut or a Winterleaf, which gives you an order unit or whatever. Boom, done.
It's not that expensive either.
It's 140 points. Also, she has once per game unbind.
Yeah.
Be like, cool. You'd be like, someone's cast that, let's say, that Gaunt Summoner or Curse of Years or whatever, with Legions of Negation stuff. He's like, cool, I'm going to go it off. And the 9 kind of goes like, not happening today, sorry.
Cool. And it's incredible.
So that's another shout for you guys.
So it's almost like I'm spot for choices. If I'm a Sylvaneth player, I've got so many great units, so many great formations. I've got so many great artifacts and endless spell choices. No matter what my play style is going to be, there's always a great way of not only building, but also playing and responding to my opponent and moving. However, the meta or whatever armies are popular, I'm going to have a good response or ability to respond.
They generally have an answer for everything.
You do. That's what I love is you can build pretty much anything, any kind of play style you want. You can respond to anything. You can build an army that basically can. But what I will say is what I said right at the top of the show, I think, is they are still quite a fragile army if played wrong, and they are an incredibly kind of taxing army to play. And I think that's something that LLV, I think, in terms of talking about all the stats from competitive match play, has noticed is Sylvaneth players tend to go generally 3-0 on day 1, and then lose at least one, if not both games on day 2. And I think burnout is a genuine thing with Sylvaneth in terms of playing.
It's a tiring army to play.
Because you really, all the time, you're thinking about your Wildwoods. And it might just sound, oh, well, it's easy. I just put my Wildwood down. I just have to be 1 inch away. But actually, subtly, the whole time, you're actually thinking about the rotation of the Wildwoods, the gaps between the trees on the Wildwood bases, if you're taking something like a Durthu, because the base doesn't actually fit through all of the gaps. It's only
like one gap.
There's one gap out of the 3 that he fits through. So the entire time when you're thinking about placing that, it might be for a charge 3 turns later. You've got to think, which way is the best way for me to rotate this so that I can not only fit the base within the restrictions, but then also be able to fit my own models, but also prevent my opponent's models from moving through gaps.
Yeah.
I know, Liam, you did it at Masters. You used the terrain on the table, combined it with your Wildwoods, turned them in certain positions so that great unclean ones, their base size, physically, there wasn't any spaces that they could actually fit through.
By the way, that took me a long time to work out. Like, I even said sorry to Gemma. So, and Masters, I was playing Gemma with a 3 Nurgle Great Unclean One list. And I said, like, literally, turn 1, most of my turn 1 hero phase was literally spending time trying to figure out how best to fit the Wildwood. Like, I was literally, like, turning it around, trying to make sure that she couldn't come around or couldn't go anywhere to get that objective. And it took me a while to realize. And then when I got it set, she just stood there and just went, I can't fit through that. I'm like, yep, exactly. And then I went to the next one and just did. It's a very tiring army to play.
And Gemma was playing the Thrice Fall battalion, which has 3 Great Unclean Ones / Rodicus. So, and we are seeing more of those monster bases. We're seeing, like, heaven forbid, a Corn Dragon getting in there. Obviously, a flying unit would be able to land on top. But essentially, like what you just said is pure gold. Is thinking about, depending on where you play, some areas ignore the holes in a Sylvaneth base. A lot of places say that you can't move into that little circle. It's in movable terrain. But you can block your opponent from getting into an objective or moving into a charge by simply thinking about the way that you position that Wildwood and the whole combination. So that's really powerful.
Yeah, because like the rule states, right, if someone, let's just say this, right, let's just say, for example, a Celestant Prime is a good example. He has got quite a big size base. I remember I was playing this guy with Celestant Prime, and I turned my terrain and I moved my models in a certain way where if he even rolled a successful charge, he actually can't land because he couldn't finish half an inch because the holes were impassable.
Yeah.
So you pretty much can place your models as well. So even like the tree bases and stuff where you place them, even where you place your models, you go, cool, you can't actually, even if you roll that 9-inch charge, you can't actually finish it because you can't finish half an inch. Like they could literally, I think it was like 0.75 of an inch or something. And my opponent was like, oh no, give it to me. I'm like, nah, sorry, dude, half an inch, can't do it. Like you can't land. And it screws people over. And that's why I think, as we said in the start of the show, Wildwoods is super important. Placement and everything is super key. And you actually spend a lot of time figuring out where to place it. Like I'm pretty sure in our game, Anthony, last week or whatever, you saw me take a while placing my woods.
Yeah. Yeah, it's something that it's such an important resource that I've seen Sylvaneth players rush and they just drop it where they want to drop, and then later on in the game they can't do what they wanted to do, or they can't bring on other woods where they want to bring on because they've really stopped them. They've stopped themselves. So it's almost like, I think Chris, you said it was quite tiring, and that's often because you're thinking 2 to 3 rounds in advance, like. What are they going to do? What am I going to do? Where do I want my next batch? Who do I want to be moving, and when and why? So it's a constant thinking and making sure you don't block yourself off in rounds to come.
Yeah, that's the thing as well in terms of blocking yourselves off the line of sight.
Yeah.
For me, I'm generally favouring Kurnoth Hunters with bows and stuff like that. I'm trying to think, okay, well, if I put this Wildwood here, am I going to want to shoot something there? Does anything have flying? If it does, then I can set it back. If it doesn't, then I need to put them within 1 inch at the front. But then I maybe don't want to put it there because I don't want to put myself into range of their magic, because if I can see them, they can see me. And there's just so many considerations that I think once you've been playing, once you've done 3 games, once you start heading into game 4, game 5, you'll be playing parts of it well. You might position all your Wildwoods correctly. You might do all of this, but there's a lot of rules and a lot of teleporting. You just start to forget things, or start to just not really consider all of your options because you have so many. And that's why I do love them as an army, is because you do have all the tools. And I genuinely believe this. You have all the tools to pretty much always go 5-0 at a tournament.
Yeah.
I think they can beat any army. I think they are. And I think that's why I've stuck with them and I keep coming back to them, especially now, is any build, if you build it right, I think you have the tools to always be able to go 5-0 in a tournament and not be, oh, I got a bad draw, or I don't think it should come down to just there's an army I can't beat. Because if you can straight away think of an army you physically can't beat, you need to change how your list is written, quite frankly, because if you can think of something that beats your army, it means that you already know that there's a flaw in your army. So write it differently so that it doesn't have that flaw. And so I think you always have the tools. It's just about, can you can you play the army well enough to its full potential to pull through and get those 5 wins? And so that for me is why I love it, because I know it's always down to me and my skill as a general if I'm going to win it or not.
Yeah. No, what really well said. Really quickly, I just want to touch. I want to touch on spell laws before I get into some more advanced, like tactical. How do you play them, and the advice I want to get from you is I've heard a lot about some of the most common Sylvaneth spells you guys use. So that's Throne of Vines, Verdant Blessing, Regrowth. Are they the 3 core spells that you'd be going for? Have I misinterpreted? What are the spells that are priority for you?
For me, Verdant Blessing and Regrowth. Throne of Vines is not something that I have been taking much. It was always something I only ever took on a Branch Witch whenever I was doing the Branch Witch bomb. But in thinking more and more, and as I've been saying, the main way I'm going to be focusing down in terms of how I play them is around Alariel and using the endless spells and using the portal. Is I'm going to be putting Throne of Vines on Alariel to make her casting more reliable, and actually just having Regrowth on a Branch Wraith, which it worries me, honestly, in having my one source of Regrowth only being on a 5-win hero. But knowing that 5-win hero can be hidden from line of sight really easily because they can just sit in the middle of a wood, and that they're going to be probably -2 against shooting if something can see them, because they're -1 anyway from being near a wood, and -1 again from being near Dryads, probably. So I feel fairly confident that I can place it in a position that protects it, but still be within range for Alariel, especially if I'm using a portal, because I can cast Regrowth through that portal. There's nothing to say that I can't then use that portal in a later turn once Alariel's moved away, if I needed her to still put the Regrowth through it and extend the range. But for me, they're the main 2, and then I would add Throne of Vines. I don't really touch the other 3.
Yeah,
Liam,
so,
anything different?
I touch Verdant Blessing, Regrowth. That's generally it at the moment. I used to play around with Tree Song a little bit when I first started playing Sylvaneth because it was a bit of fun. At the time, it only really works if you target a Citadel Wood that has 1 base, but you just can't move it afterwards because it can't be moved within 3. It's a one where the woods go off, and if whatever lands is wholly within on the Wildwood can move, the tree can move, but you have to move. You can't be less than 3 inches away from enemy models or terrain.
So again, it's like the Tree Lord Ancient problem. You won't have a Wildwood that is not within 3 of another terrain feature or model. So Tree Song I just see as another way of guaranteed setting off
D3 mortal wins,
of just doing D3 mortal wins. And if you're casting it next to that wood, you've then got the chance of rolling a 5-up and doing it again.
Yeah, that's it.
So I put Tree Song in as do I want to do this as a damaging build? But I think, talking about it, I think using the endless spells and using the portal is just a better way to make use of your already built-in damaging spells that just have short range, and just extending the range of your spells that way rather than Tree Song, because it's a 7 to cast, so I think it's the highest of any of them. And I've just found it really not reliable for doing much. And it's only D3 mortal wins at the end of the day. I think you're better off you can cast Regrowth, heal yourself, and then still on a 5-up do mortal wounds anyway. Yeah. So for me, I kind of moved away from Tree Song.
Yeah, and tournaments are now taking on more of the Realmscape features. So maybe the damage dealing is within the Realmscape instead. So Liam, you were saying something?
Another spell I think we should give a quick shout is the Dwellers Below. I think that's a pretty cool spell. I know Hayden used it against me when he played Sylvaneth when I was playing my daughters at Sydney Slaughter. And it took up quite a lot. What it is, it's casting ability 7. Pick an enemy unit within 10 inches. You can easily buff up that range with artifacts and stuff if you have it. So similar to the Silver Circle and stuff, just bump it up to 6 inches. And the Balewind Vortex, again, bump it up. So this is really good for a Narut build. So if you have the Branch Witch bomb going off, you can also have this one going off as well. So that Branch Witch is going to be like, oi, Witch Elves or whatever, take it out. So pretty much casting value 7, pick an enemy unit within 10, or you can buff it. Roll a dice for each model in that unit you picked. So it's really good to wipe out hordes. So 30 Witch Elves or 30 Zangors, everything that's like in a big bulk. Be like, cool, roll a dice for each model. On a 6 takes a mortal wound. So it's it's similar to the Gaunt Summoner.
That's literally what I was about to say. That is that's the Gaunt Summoner spell.
However, though, Gaunt Summoner is on a 4 or more. This is just on a 6. So the Gaunt Summoner is a lot stronger.
True.
But the other thing with the Gaunt Summoner is it's models within that range, not the unit. So you could literally have a unit just within 10, but you still affect that whole unit.
Yeah.
Does it make sense? So I think this is actually a little bit better, but also at the same time a little bit worse. So it's a bit balanced. So I think it's a bit more balanced version of the Gaunt Summoner, in my opinion.
Sounds like a great horde killer, considering I would say that more armies are now putting more bodies on the board. So very valuable spell to have up your sleeve.
Yeah, exactly. Like for me at the moment, every single list that I've been writing for other armies, such as Daughters of Cain, Legion of Blood, my Sonation and stuff, it's heaps of bodies. So if I saw someone with Dwellers below or whatever, I'd be like, okay, cool. Like I need to avoid that caster because that's going to hit me. So yeah, I think it's a cool spell to shout out. Like I wouldn't say it's an auto include, like Verdant Blessing Regrowth auto include. If you have enough casters and you got Gnarlroot, give it a go.
I think if you took Gnarlroot, you could take the Reaping potentially as well. You'd be giving up Throne of Vines, but you could potentially double up on or double down on the Branch Witch Bomb if you take the Reaping in Gnarlroot, because the Reaping is cast on a 6. All enemy units within 3 inches suffer D3 mortal wounds. So again, if you're putting that on a model that's on a Balewind for +6 and with the Silverwood Circlet for +6, it's suddenly all enemy units within 15 inches are taking D3 mortal wounds. And if you cast that through a portal, again, you can probably from turn 1, especially now that a lot more scenarios you set up 18 inches apart, from turn 1 you can probably hit almost everything in your opponent's army for D3 mortal wounds. And then if you also cast Branch Witch spell of Unleash Spites, probably hit again all of those units for another 1 or 2 mortal wounds. So potentially from one model you could wipe out foot characters, and you're doing it to every unit.
Now,
so like Daughters of
Cain
or something like that that's got 3 maybe Hag Queens on foot all clustered up, and you smash them with that, and then you think maybe you took the Knight Incanter with an Everblaze Comet and you drop that down, you probably can reasonably reliably, not on too crazy dice, get this off and just take out all foot heroes in your opponent's army turn 1.
You completely disarm the Death Star just through a few little cheeky combos.
I was literally going to say the exact same thing. If we wind back and talk about what we did with the Knight Incantor, add in the Branch Witch Bomb with that spell and her spell and the all the portals and stuff, right?
Yeah.
I would say you could successfully take out the 3 hags, quite a few witch elves, because they're all going to stay in a bubble, right? They're all going to stay close, right? I reckon you could actually also take out the Cauldron pretty well.
Yeah.
I reckon you could do 13 mortal wounds if you roll quite hot.
So there's one thing I want to bring in here from Harvest Boon, which is probably the build I would look to maybe do this in alternately, is Harvest Boon get a special artifact. I don't know if you can talk about it. The Tear of Grace.
I did say it, but I said don't use it.
The bearer always gets an extra spell, and then they also get to add 3 inches to the range of all their spells. So this would let you put it on 2 models. So you could have one model with +6 inches from the Silverwood Circlet. You could have one model with +3 inches. And then when you're using the portal, you're using Balewind, you can put something through that's got longer range from the Balewind, maybe doesn't need to use the portal. Then you can use the other one with this 3, like through the portal. So they get the extra spell that they know. So it could be useful, but it doesn't let them cast an extra spell is the only thing. So you'd need to be doing it on something that was going to say use Chronomantic Cogs to rewind time or cast a Balewind or something like that. But yeah, there's options there for all of the spells, but the main 2 are definitely Regrowth and Blessing.
Yeah, so those are the 2 main ones. Like most times when I write my army list, I have one that has Verdant Blessing because you can only cast 1 spell per the rule of 1. And I have 2 with Regrowth, so in case one dies, I still have a backup.
Yeah. And in previous lists that we've played together, you've had 3 Branch Wraiths, and 2 have had Regrowth. Just for that reason, is you want to make sure that you, if one gets disarmed, you've still got 1 still up your sleeve. And they're relatively cheap as well, so there's no reason not to take an extra 1.
Yeah.
This is great. I'm actually quite scared that I'm going to be creating a couple of Sylvaneth monsters from who's watching us, especially if I place somebody who has watched this video and they've gone out and done what you guys have done. I'm completely screwed. So thank you guys.
It's all right.
Thank you for, I mean, we're not wrapping up just yet. I probably want to get to some more mastery, and I think probably throw at least 2 more questions to you guys. I know we're wrapping on almost 3 hours, so I probably wasn't expecting this much knowledge to drop. So you guys are slaying it.
I'm not gonna lie, when me and Chris recorded an episode like a year ago, we honestly thought we were recording like an hour-and-a-half episode and went for 3 hours as well. Like there's just so much to talk about.
I thought 2 hours. I thought, oh, these guys will do 2 hours, but so much has happened to Sylvaneth, and I'm certainly hungry to learn more, considering it was a great army at the start of Age of Sigmar. It's only gotten better, and it's almost like it's an army that people are rediscovering. And with Malign Sorcery, with new armies coming in, like the Marathis and the Deepkins of the world, these were synergies that were never available in the original Sigmar. So let's talk a little bit about some tactical pieces, and how do you like what's the advice that you would give a new player who's going to start Sylvaneth?
Decide just right at the start. Decide on your play style.
Yeah.
Do you like aggressive combat armies? Do you like defensive combat armies? Do you like defensive ranged armies shooting? Do you like heavy?
Do you like magic?
Do you like hordes? Do you like big monsters? Do you like
shenanigans?
Know your style, and then look to one of the. I'm gonna take out Ironbark, but it's still there. But for someone that's starting, pick one of the 4 Wargroves. And even then, I'd probably Dreadwood's still cool.
I would still say take Dreadwood because.
So yeah, pick Gnarlroot, Dreadwood, Harvest Boon, or Winterleaf. Read them, decide which one you like, and which one. If you decided you like Dryads, for example, like you like hordes, I'm gonna straight away say, okay, head towards Harvest Boon and Winterleaf, because they're the ones
that are quite similar.
You're taking Dryads anyway. You have to take them, so great, take your Dryads. If you prefer the Tree Revenants or the Spite-Revenants, that should immediately tell you if you want to take Gnarlroot or if you want to take Dreadwood.
Yeah.
But always remember, any of them can take any of the units, because the great thing is you can fill them out with any Sylvaneth units you want, and you maintain that 1 drop.
So for those people who love the Kurnoth Hunters, don't worry, they can be in whatever list you want.
Yeah, anything you want.
It's more about the baseline.
Yeah, I would say if you want a combat charging if you want a charging army, which generally is going to be a combat army, probably look at Harvest Bone. If you just want magic, go Gnarlroot. And then if you want some kind of mix, if you like flexibility and stuff like that, then I would look at the Dreadwood / Winterleaf mix in between. If there's an order unit that you love that isn't Sylvaneth, go immediately to Winterleaf. If it's a wizard, go to Winterleaf or Gnarlroot.
Yep.
And then just basically that's where I'd start. And then you tailor down in any of them. Your artifacts and stuff probably aren't going to change, in terms of you're probably always taking Ranu's Lamentary and you're always taking Acorn of the Ages, no matter what of those 4 you pick, because they're so vital. Your woods are always going to be vital. And kind of go from there, really. If you want to take the Monster Mash, Dreadwood's probably more your fave, because of being able to redeploy a slow one and potentially move 3 of them straight up the board. Because with plus move, if you took a Durthu with, for example, the realm item, what's it called, the cloak that lets you fly and +4 move, Thermal Rider Cloak. Because that way you can reposition one Durthu 6 away, or you can just move. If you've got your Durthu with a Thermal Rider Cloak, he's movement 9 now, and Alariel's movement 16. Maybe you take Dryad as well, knowing that if you only roll 1 on your stratagems, you can just pick the one that lets you move up to 3 units. Durthu can move 9, Dryad can move 10, Alariel can move 16, and then in your first turn, they can all move again. All of them are going to be 3 away from your opponent. So that's something where guaranteed you want a Monster Mash in your opponent's face. You can't fail to roll a 1 on those stratagems. And if you've built in that +4 move onto Durthu and given him fly so he can hop over screens, then you like Monster Mash, you want to do that, you go Dreadwood. Like, if you want magic and like support heroes and stuff like that, go Gnarlroot. But to be honest, you can do anything in any of them. But that's probably that would be my starting advice.
Another advice I would ask for a person is see how many models they want to push around. The cool thing with Sylvaneth is you can do bare, like, small model count, or you can do the massive hordes. even though massive hordes are more competitive than a lesser amount, I would, if you want to do like not too many models, I would say you go Gnar route, because you got to have a Tree Lord Ancient, and then you would probably want to Durthu and other things like as a combat thing. So I would say Gnar route for like lesser models, and then if you want to go for a bit more of a horde, Winterleaf and Harvest Moon as well. That's probably a cool thing as well to think about. And Dreadwood, I think you can do a bit of both. You can do heavy amounts of Dryads. That's generally it. Advice for getting started and stuff as well is pick up, I would honestly say, don't pick up 8 bases of trees straight away. No. I would also say pick up probably 1 to 2 bases. So you have 1 starting and then 1 to do Acorn, so you can get the idea of getting the hang of teleporting and stuff.
I would buy the box. I'd buy the new box that they released.
Oh yeah,
I think you get 4.
3. 3.
3.
3. I think.
I think it's 3.
Okay, yeah. I would buy that and just play single base Wildwoods.
Wildwoods.
So
yeah. Just to get the hang of the teleporting and stuff. I think that's really good.
And if you've watched this video, the whole time we've talked about the importance of the Wildwoods and the positioning and the summoning and the movement, and everything is centered around that. So I think that's a great piece of advice, is start small and just slowly build that muscle.
But I would say if you want to play Sylvaneth, you have to be prepared, and you want to be able to compete. You have to be someone that is willing to paint up, to build and paint, and always bring with you
the trees.
A lot of Wildwoods and trees, because most tournaments you go to will mandate that you have to bring and play with the trees. You will find it a much more enjoyable experience using the trees in the bases rather than just seeing holes, I'll be honest, because I used to just leave them off, and I much preferred playing with the trees. It makes the table look much better. But you need to know that if you're going to embark on a Sylvaneth army, you are going to have to buy and build and paint a lot of Wildwood bases. So if you don't like that, Sylvaneth's not the army for you.
Yeah,
and probably worth calling out, if you're a traveler, you need to bring those with you. And if you're someone like me who flies a lot, I need to think about how I'm bringing up to 8 bases worth of the trees with me on top of my model. So logistics is super important if you're in the same shoes that I'm in.
Yeah, like and the other thing for me,
tip, don't glue the leaves on if you're going to travel with them.
Yeah. And the other thing as well is why only start with not just 8, like don't go off and buy 8 trees. It's just not because of pricing wise, but also just because there's going to be times and situations in the games where you can't fit 2 bases of trees as 1 Citadel Wildwood. So getting the hang of only fitting 1 Citadel Wildwood, practicing with tight spaces and stuff, is going to be super helpful for you in the future when you do have those 8, but then you go, oh wait, I can only fit 1. So you can just, because the thing is, well, your play style has to change. Like you have to be flexible when you're playing Sylvaneth, where everything's not going to go right for you. Like you might be thinking, I'm going to fit all the bases in, but there's going to be sometimes where you're going to turn up to a tournament, and some tournaments now, I've been seeing this, are bringing in bigger pieces of terrain.
Yeah,
where you can't actually fit like 1 Citadel Wildwood as 2 bases. So
early Sigmar, we'd probably have up to 6 pieces of terrain on a table. Yeah. Now we're seeing 9 to 12 pieces of terrain, and exactly what you just said, the terrain pieces are getting bigger. So the likelihood of getting maximum bases on the table is very hard. It's very unlikely. And I think preparing yourself to only have minimum is a great thing.
It's good practice. So for someone who's starting out, just practice doing singular bases. I think is a good shout. Just because you're going to be in that situation where you're going to turn up to a tournament and you're going to be like, okay, cool, it's going to be tight fitting, I can do this. Instead of practicing with all the bases you have, just from like 0 practice of 1 basis, and then you're going like, oh, how am I going to do this? Like, what's going to happen? So I think that's one huge thing.
And it's probably also worth calling out that more of the armies now are getting their own terrain piece. So, you're going to pardon? We got Nurgle, you've got Deepkin, you've got their boat, the Moon Clan's Gloom Spider getting their own terrain piece. So we're just adding more. We're adding more and more and more stuff to the table. So
the interesting part as well is now, so Nurgle and Sylvaneth terrain have to be set up at the same time. So we have to roll off for it. So that's a pretty important roll off, because some Nurgle people are going to try and make sure you can't get that hotspot.
Yeah.
Right? So that's one thing. So when you're going up against Nurgle, that first roll-off is actually pretty important because you guys are going to be screwing up each other's hotspots, if that makes sense. Right?
Yep. So noble players want to set up a feculent Narmor, and they can slingshot with a run and charge if they're within range of the Narmor. So they're looking to use their terrain piece while you're looking at using yours. So positioning's critical.
So that's important. Now the second one is Deepkin, right? Deepkin has to set up after I think we roll off the side. So after the Sylvaneth Wildwood's been deployed.
Yeah.
So now they're pretty much they got a pretty cool part where they get to respond to what you've done.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. They're going to respond. So pretty much you've given them a question and they've given you an answer, and and they also can block off. So if you're going for an alpha strike charge, they're going to be like, cool, not happening today.
Yeah.
They can literally set up in front, so they're making you move around. So that's when we're looking at artifacts that Chris has mentioned where you can fly. So making Durthu fly is super important, where you can make him fly over the shipwreck is cool.
It
So
also
Prepare for the worst, hope for the best.
It also means, the other thing I didn't mention, with that artifact of making Durthu fly, is he no longer has his line of sight blocked by being behind a Wildwood.
Yeah.
So that does mean your opponent can see you, but it also means he can teleport behind a Wildwood and shoot
and
stuff.
fly over. Yeah, and fly over.
And also fly over. So, I think Thermal Rider Cloak is a good choice on Durthu.
So those things as well. We don't know what the Moon Clan setup is like yet, so I'm not going to say anything yet. Also, Hearthstone. Hearthstone's pretty much generally in your opponent's deployment because they want that buff. So don't worry too much about that. But I reckon Nurgle and Deepkin are huge counters to Sylvaneth when it comes to answering what we want. Also, they can block off like where you can fit in another wood, like especially the Deepkin one. That's a huge footprint. And the other thing as well is the Deepkin one, the way they've worded it, it's 2 gloom tides and the shipwreck can be glued together, so you can actually have 2 big shipwrecks. So if a Deepkin player is really down in some money to have the 2 big shipwrecks, that's a huge footprint that they're laying on the ground as well. So
generally both players will know, looking at the table, where are the gaps that the Wildwoods can fit. And if I was playing Deepkin and I had those 2 boats, I would not be thinking at all where I would want them for me. I would just
screwing over Sylvaneth player.
That hole there, they're going to try and put a Wildwood in. Not happening. I'm putting my boat there. And that hole there is where they're going to try and put their acorn. I'm putting my boat in it. And just going, no, you get your 1 at the start that I can't do anything about, but now you're going to be in trouble, or they're going to be right to the sides of the board. And that is something you've got to watch out for Deepkin, because they can do that if they place their boat smart.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, as a Sylvaneth player, you'll get away with it the first time you play somebody. If someone has never played against Sylvaneth, they won't know how to handle the Wildwoods, and you'll get free reign. But then the more an opponent gets experience with Sylvaneth, they know your tricks, and they are going to try to stop those bases going off. That is priority number 1. So
there's something actually while we're talking on things that you're to be aware of that your opponent potentially can do in terms of actually being able to impact where you can place your Wildwoods despite not having a turn, is Tzeentch. If Tzeentch players take the Changeling at the start of the game, before the game begins, they can deploy him anywhere on the board. But it's after models have been set up. So I would wait, see when my opponent has put down the model with Acorn of the Ages. From that, you know the exact space they're going to try and set up a Wildwood, and I would just
place it right over there.
I would put the Changeling in the middle of that space.
However, the wording is that he doesn't actually exist yet, so can you actually place it under him?
No, he's still there.
He's still there? Okay.
He's still a model. So
he's treated as an ally model until he's revealed.
So that's something to be aware of, is any Tzeentch player with a Changeling can also just shut down your Acorn.
That's pretty cool. Didn't even
They have to throw away the Changeling, because you'll be able to then just go over and deal with him, sure. But to be honest, they've neutered your Acorn. I mean, maybe
which
not.
Is huge.
If you can go in and kill the Changeling and then clear the space and hold on and use the Acorn somewhere else, maybe.
Well, you can't clear him off because he's not revealed.
Probably not. So yeah, it's just something to be aware of. People playing Tzeentch and using the Changeling, he can shut down where you can place a Wildwood. What
you could do though with the Changeling though, let's just talk about the Changeling at the moment, because that's a huge thing. You could cast your Verdant Blessing spell, right? And you're out of range of the Lord of Change, let's say, right? You're making your opponent now think, do I want to stop that Verdant Blessing? So they would probably have to use the Changeling to dispel and make him revealed, and then try an Arcane Bolt and take him out.
Potentially, I think a smart player
But
just know that if you've got something like a changeling, there is going to be the Acon could be a great way to reveal the changeling early. At the same time, it's a tool that might stop you from doing what you need to do initially. So I think practicing these worst case scenarios goes back to that point is invaluable experience.
Yeah.
Finally, probably the last question I have for you guys, unless anything else you want to discuss, is there any final top tips based on all of the experience, all the games that you guys have played? Is there anything else that a Sylvaneth player needs to know from your experience that would help them?
Always think 1, if not 2 turns ahead. Just always be looking for those small gaps where you can fit 1 Wildwood base and do a trail 9 inches away and just sneak objectives, not with charges. Most objectives being controlled with a 6-inch zone of control these days make them much easier if people move off their objectives to just trail Dryads to a Wildwood and make a conga line, get 1 or 2 Dryads, just enough to outnumber them, not need to engage in combat. There's nothing they can do to stop it if they've left those spaces for you. Is just try and see them and just try and set the moves up ahead. And honestly, Dryads are the reason you'll win most of your games, because not only are they bodies that are tough to go through, but it's because they are big units that once teleported, they let you do big, long conga lines, which can let you steal objectives. So ultimately, the Dryads are the things that win you the game.
I think Chris can agree with me on this. If you're running either Harvestmoon or Winterleaf, you got the Forest Folk battalion. If you really need a charge with your Dryads, like really need that charge, do that once per game. Dryad teleporting. So what Forest Folk can do is you redeploy everything in the Forest Folk within 3 inches of a Wildwood, not wholly within, just within 3 inches, 9 inches away from your opponent. This is important because they don't have to roll for the travel through the realm spell, because there's so many times where you really need those Dryads to get that charge. And when you teleport them for the Wildwood and you roll that 1, you've got now a stuck unit of Dryads. So doing that teleporting shenanigans, where you pretty much once per game move 9 away from your opponent, you go, cool, I can now charge comfortably. I can now do a comfortable charge, not like saying successful though, but don't have that scary part of rolling that 1. Because you have, let's say, 3 to 4 units of Dryads that need to make a charge. You can literally just be like, cool, I can now safely say, get that charge. Does it make sense? Agreed, Chris?
Yeah. It's something I talked about when I talked on my podcast about Masters, and the learning point for me in Game 5, that the burnout, I guess, got to me, of realizing the strength of Forest Folk. Because until that game, I'd never done it. I'd never really seen the point of it, because you can always set up 9 away. And then I finally kind of realized, if you take Harvestmoon or you take Winterleaf, so either of the 2 battalions that use Forest Folk, they are the ones where you don't want to deploy your Dryads off the table in the enclaves. You always put them on the table, even just your 10s. You either backboard edge them, put them right out the way, or clump them onto the existing terrain pieces, because that's not going to get in the way of where you're going to place your Wildwoods. And then at the end of your first hero phase, or at any point in your hero phase, after you've used your Acorn, you've used Verdant Blessing, etc., to set up your Wildwoods, you use your Forest Folk once per game redeploy, and you can put those Dryads anywhere on the table, provided they're within 3 of a Wildwood and 9 away from your opponent, or anywhere within your deployment zone, regardless of not being within 3 of a Wildwood. You can just put them wherever you need them to be. So it lets you basically... It's effectively the same thing as deploying them off the table. Your opponent doesn't see anything, because you're just chucking them in corners. They're not going to be, at the end of your first turn, they're not going to be where you put them. They're just out the way, but on the table, because the important thing is they need to be on the table for that redeploy. And then you can put them anywhere without getting in the way of setting up your woods. And that, for me, is what Forest Folk is for.
Yeah. Talking about putting things sitting off the table, I remember when I first started playing Sylvaneth, and I know most Sylvaneth players do this, you get the habit of putting a lot of things in the woods to make that mysterious, like telling your opponent like where everything's going to be kind of thing. You'll start realizing that that's useless, especially now with movement. As I said at the start, movement is key in this game now. The only unit that I ever leave in the Wildwood, like set aside are Kurnoth Hunters. Because it's really annoying when they teleport and they roll that 1. I'm like, fuck. Sorry for the language. Sorry. Anyways.
That's all right. That's all right. It's 10 o'clock, so I'm imagining all the kids are at bed.
Okay, cool.
Or they're watching this with their parents.
Okay, cool. Right, because I'm just like, it's super tiring, and I know that you want to keep this PG.
Kids. He's
This
the villain.
this is the tiring that we've been talking about. Is that we've been streaming for 3 hours now, and he's now hitting that game 5 wall.
Yeah. So I never want the only Kurnoth Hunters that I put aside. The only never put aside is Kurnoth Hunters because they don't take the risk of rolling that dice. If that makes sense. Everyone else, they can roll it. Unless it's Forest Folk, I can just do that once per game. You just want a safe bet. Like, so for example, for my Harvest Moon list, right? Everything that's in the Harvest Folk, so my 3 Branch Wraiths and my 3 units of Dryads, if I do that once per game, Forest Folk move, I don't have to roll. And Durthu, if he rolls a 1, he's not tangled because he's a Tree Lord. Because the special rule says Tree Lords don't get affected. So Kurnoth Hunters, I leave them aside, so when they come on the board, they don't have to roll, and they're still 9 away. That's the only thing you're going to start learning, that you want to start everything on the board. You don't want to leave anything aside. That's pretty much the best thing I can say. If Chris agrees with me, sweet. Yeah. But generally, you might be thinking, oh, it's really cool. I can do a Stormcast kind of teleport thing. Don't do it. It's unless
you think you're being clever and going, oh, my opponent doesn't know what I'm doing. But to be honest, your deployment doesn't matter because you teleport all over the place to your Wildwoods anyway. Yeah. So your army, it's not going to be where you deploy it at the end of the first turn, and your opponent already knows you're going first. So don't worry about trying to be clever in deployment and denying your opponent knowledge of where your stuff is by deploying it off the table. Just put it on the table so that you can't roll those. Like, you can't have the chance of rolling those 1s because you use the Forest Folk redeploy, or like Liam said, you put Kurnoths down like in the woods. You do that, sure, but that's only to avoid having the possibility of teleporting and rolling a 1. Like, you don't need to hide stuff in the trees because you're then restricted by not being able. If you do deploy from the trees, you're not able to tail out. Every model has to come down within 3 of the Wildwood. So you're actually limiting your own movement if you do that.
Yeah.
Basically start stuff on the table.
Yeah. Like, the only unit I would say is Kurnoth Hunters. That's it. Because because their damage output is quite thing, and they have to roll for it. So that's it, really.
Not excellent advice. Anything else you guys want to mention about Sylvaneth before we start wrapping up?
I'm sure I could talk about them forever, but
I know you guys could.
I'll leave it there, but
I think the one thing to say, and I think Chris can agree with me with this, especially if people are new to competitive AOS, and you ask your opponent if they've played Sylvaneth before, and if they say no, please take the time to explain everything, because you don't want people to leave with a foul taste of this army. It is a tricky army for even your opponent to understand how it works. Like, even if you're learning, it is so hard for your opponent to understand what the hell's going on. So just generally, just with this army, there is a reason why there was a bad reputation of it in Edition 1, because a lot of people had no idea what's to go with it. So just take time, explain it. I know Travis, when he was playing at RCGT 2 years ago, he made a little booklet explaining his opponents what his army did. So something like that for your opponents when you're going to a competitive scene. Just be kind and explain to them what Sylvaneth is, because it is a tricky army to understand, and it is a tiring army to understand even for your opponent to follow. And that's generally it, really. I could talk about it forever.
And this is general tournament talk, is that you want to beat your opponent on tactics, not on gotcha moments.
Yeah.
So and you're 100% right. As a Sylvaneth player, there's so many complex and different rules to every other army. It's if I haven't experienced it, or maybe I've only had 1 or 2 games, it's quite hard to understand the rules and the intricacies. So explaining to them, giving them even the opportunity. Do you understand what Wildwoods do? Do you know this? Do you know this? Yeah. And don't just ask them, do you know what my army does? Because most people don't want to look like an idiot and go, yeah, no, I know. And then halfway through the game, you've had the little tricks that you could have handled right at the start, but in actual fact, they just weren't comfortable or confident.
Like, perfect example, right? Wildwood's getting off on within a 6-inch of casting a spell. If your opponent goes within that Wildwood, I always just say, hey, are you sure you want your wizard to be there?
Yeah.
And if they go, oh yeah, I'm like, okay, cool. Because if you cast a spell, the woods have a chance of going off.
Yeah.
And they go, oh, okay, thanks for reminding me. Like stuff like that. It's just
I mean,
tricky
the
things like that.
Blocking line of sight, which is a new FAQ update. People may not, they may, old Sylvaneth that didn't block line of sight. Now it does. Yep. So you're right. Courtesy and just going through some of the biggest tricks. You don't tell them your strategy, but
like you don't want someone to like cast a spell, right? And they have a whole unit in the Wildwood, and you go, oh, and a 5 out of the woods go off, and they're like, oh wait, what? And you just go, oh, yeah, because you're within 6 inches. You don't want them to be like, oh, didn't like. You don't want to be that dickhead.
Yeah.
That's just it, really.
The one tip I would say for gameplay is get yourself a starter box or find some of the 18-inch whippy sticks, cut them in half, and have a bunch of 9-inch rules, like 9-inch measures.
I have like 4
because
now.
The entire army is always teleporting 9 away. So just being able to lay a load of them down and it just making it really clear where you can put your models, where you're teleporting to between your opponent's units that you can fit. It just speeds up gameplay massively because you just can't do it with a single tape measure. So just having a bunch of those 9-inch sticks is really, 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 really important.
Yeah, I have like 4 now. They're super helpful.
Honestly, I think I've got about 20.
Yeah, there's plenty of gaming companies, like Pro Painted, I think, have them, and just check out like AOS accessories, and you'll find a whole range of these extended combat gauges which are up to 9 inches. So highly recommend them.
That's it, really. And also just enjoy playing this army. It is so much fun to play. Even if you're losing, you're still having a ball.
And if anyone's like watch this, listening to this, and wants to chat to us more, you can just hit either of us up on Sydney
Twitter,
Facebook group, or hit me up on Twitter at Wounded Mortally. Send a message to the Mortally Wounded Facebook page, anything like that. I'll see it. I'm happy to chat Sylvaneth all the time. So Chris and Liam's details are going to be in the comments section. So if you want to hit them up on Twitter, you want to find them on their Facebook pages. So the Mortally Wounded page, for example, highly recommend it. These guys have been playing Sylvaneth since it's been out. So that's 3 years now. And they've been doing it competitively, and they have an amazing track record of performance. So you've got 2 people of real authority here. So I highly recommend hitting them up, listening to their advice, trying things. If it doesn't work the first time, keep practicing. It is a game, especially an army that has a lot of nuances and things that can be hard to pull off. So just keep practicing and trying things out. This has been great. I've learned so much. Hopefully I haven't unleashed any beasts for CanCon or any tournaments I'm attending. Hopefully no Americans watching this, because I don't want to play anyone in Adepticon who has listened to this and go, oh yeah, that Chris Welfare and that Liam, yeah, they're great. They taught me this. Oh fuck.
Yeah, it's your fault.
It is.
Tyler.
Yeah, please, no Tylers. No. Nobody listen to these guys. But as someone listening, as someone who's aspiring Sylvaneth player who would like to get that maybe as their next army, and someone who plays against them quite a lot, this has been great. I've learned a lot. You guys are masters at Sylvaneth, so thank you for imparting your wisdom for 3 hours. Quick reminders: if these guys want to find you, if someone wants to find you, where can they find you, Liam?
So Twitter is Shadowhammer_, because there's a band apparently called Shadowhammer that took the handle, bloody bastards. And my Facebook page, Shadowhammer, the Age of Sigmar podcast. You can also find me on the Warhammer Age of Sigmar Sydney, Australia page or group page. I'm an admin there with the coach. So you're more than always happy to hit me up. I get people hitting me up all the time. I chat a bit on the Age of Sigmar Sylvaneth page. Sometimes I rant because some people just trigger me. And I'm the villain. Like, what else can I say? Like, if you piss me off, you get a rant. So that's where you can find me.
And Chris, where can people find you?
At Wounded Mortally on Twitter, because again, Mortally Wounded was gone. Mortally Wounded Facebook page, or I'm also in the Sylvaneth WhatsApp group. If you're in that, or you ask someone to be added to it, then I'm in there as well.
Can you add me?
Along with loads of other people like Laurie Huggett Wild and stuff. So that's a really good place for all things Sylvaneth as well.
So if you want to be invited to the WhatsApp group, I can't put the link because that encourages spam bots, but I'm sure you could privately message Chris and ask him nicely to join.
I'm not an admin, but I can try and get you added.
Oh, well,
thanks,
I'm sure
Chris.
Slide you a few dollary dues and I'm sure you can let us in. Maybe. All right, I think we're wrapped up. Guys, it's been an absolute pleasure. I've learned so much. I hope you guys have learned. Ironically enough, after our tech glitch, we actually went live and we had people watching us. So that's been pretty cool. So I didn't tell you guys until the end. So we've had people watching, which has been amazing. But it's been wonderful. I've learned a lot. Thank you very much again. We will do more faction focuses, so stay tuned. Until then, happy war gaming. Hope you roll lots of 6s and 1s. Thanks, guys.
Peace.